Chapter 543. Speak. Yang Dingtian said. Did you kill my elder brother, Lingwu? Vulture asked seriously. If you still treat me as your sister, then tell me honestly, did you kill my brother? Was Aoshuang the you that Vulture was referring to? Of course, she was the closest person to Yang Dingtian. However, Lingwu's death was undoubtedly an accident. Yang Dingtian spread his hands and did not answer directly. Instead, he smiled and said, the news of my death should have spread throughout Zhongzhou. Why are you still here? You're not dead yet. Vulture asked slowly. I'll ask you again, did you kill my brother Lingwu? Answer me directly. I didn't kill him. But if he's dead, there must be a way for him to die. Yang Dingtian said slowly. Vulture looked at Yang Dingtian's face for a long time, and said with a complicated gaze. Brother Yang Dingtian, you have a fanatical temperament and charm that makes people want to follow you. No matter if they're stronger than you, or have a higher status than you. They can't help but worship you as their leader. I used to be like that too. My husband has never commented on anyone in this world, except you. Do you know what he said about you? I'd like to hear more. Yang Dingtian said. He said that Yang Dingtian is the most fanatical, righteous, and amazing person I've ever seen in this world. Vulture said slowly. He's too kind. Yang Dingtian said. Vulture continued. I'm not done yet. Then continue. Yang Dingtian said. My husband also said that Yang Dingtian is already possessed by the devil. When one's will is above everyone's will, then the more noble he is, the more dangerous he is. Every time he walks towards victory, he's one step closer to the abyss. And he wasn't the only one who fell into the abyss. Countless people fell into the abyss as well. Vulture said word by word. He said that you've already gone mad. Evil ways. You're going to take sides and attack those who don't. Unless everyone is on your side, you're going to take sides and attack those who don't. You've already gone mad. What else? Yang Dingtian asked. He said that what this world actually needs is not nobility and justice, but more moderation. So he's willing to be the lubricant to offset the disaster and pain you're bringing to the world. But he's having a harder time being that lubricant. Even if he tries his best, he won't be able to stop the disaster from happening. Vulture asked, how many people will die in this war in the Central Plains? What right do you have to let them die? Brother Yang Dingtian, I used to be your believer. I used to be hot-blooded. Even though I said that I didn't care about justice, I also had the impulse to shed my blood for the Tiando League. I was a little afraid of this. Vulture said slowly. And at this time my husband appeared. He was like a cool breeze that blew away the heat in my heart and calmed me down. Do you know why I didn't rush back during the war in Cloud Sky City? Because my husband told me that he wouldn't stop me. But as my husband, he begged me to observe for a few months. If I still wanted to return to your identity, he would send me back. Thank you, my husband. During that period of time, he was always by my side. He calmed me down amidst the painful choice and torment. Moreover, I calmed down blissfully. Now that I've calmed down, I can see that you're possessed by the devil and that you're going mad. In the past, I didn't dare to see you because I didn't go through life and death with you. So I felt guilty and tried my best to make up for it. Thank you, my husband. When I wanted to make up for it, I was insulted time and time again by him, making him, the originally high and mighty bright moon, have to bend down and haggle with the ordinary people. Yang Dingtian once said that a person who felt guilty for doing something wrong was the scariest person. Because in order to not feel guilty, this person would desperately tell herself that what she did was not wrong. She would desperately attack and deny the person who made her feel guilty. So when a person did something wrong to another person, even if the other person forgave her generously, it was useless. This person would use a cruel method to make up for her lack of morals. That was to deny the other person completely and hurt the other person, because this was the only way she could feel at ease. However, these words could not be said to Vulture by Yang Dingtian. She was only 16 years old. Brother Yang Dingtian, I'm very glad that I've calmed down. I'm also very grateful to my husband for his gentleness and tolerance. He let me calm down and get me back on the right track. I won't continue to be fanatical and fall into the abyss with you. I'll even fall into the abyss with the Vulture Palace. Now I even understand why my great-grandfather treated you so coldly. Vulture smiled gently at young Dingtian. She took off her ring of protection and said, "This is the last time I call you brother, young Dingtian. I'll return this ring to you." Young Dingtian took the ring of protection. "Finally, I'll say something for my husband. Young Dingtian, you should stop before going too far. This time, all your secret weapons have been destroyed. You no longer have any hope of victory. In that case, you can negotiate with the central region and stop this massacre." Vulture said, "Young Dingtian, you know that I don't care about the life and death of these people. However, my husband just has to be so compassionate. So before I leave, I'll pass on a message to you. Enough people have died. How many more people do you want to let die for a war that has no hope of victory? Stop before going too far. We'll still protect you and your wife." Young Dingtian couldn't help but laugh at this moment. "So, you planted the ghost bird spirit in Ling Wu for my own good." Vulture's complexion suddenly changed. An incomparably complicated radiance appeared in her eyes. Then, she quickly made her face turn cold and said, "That's right. No matter what my original intention was, perhaps it was to let you stay one step away from the abyss in the end. Perhaps it was to let millions or tens of millions of people die in the western region. In short, I have a clear conscience." What a good clear conscience. At this moment, young Dingtian's admiration for Wu Yuming was really as high as a mountain. It didn't matter how strong a person's martial arts was. What was powerful was that it could directly change a person's state of mind, and even change a person's view of the world. "Many thanks for your and your husband's advice," young Dingtian said. "However, it's already too late. I've already chopped off Zhu Hongli's head." Vulture slightly trembled and said in a hoarse voice, "Young Dingtian, you've indeed gone mad to the point that you can't be saved. Even if you know that there's no hope of victory, you still want to drag countless people to their deaths. Zhu Hongxue is Zhu Hongli's elder brother. You still killed Zhu Hongli in front of him. You're not putting righteousness before family. You're destroying human relations. Speak your unspoken words," young Dingtian said. "Since you've already lost your mind and want countless people to die for a war that's destined to fail, then we'll tell you directly. For the sake of my husband's compassion, for the sake of saving millions of people from dying, our Vulture sect may have no choice but to make a relevant response to prevent this tragedy from happening." Vulture said, "In other words, you're no longer neutral?" Young Dingtian said, "I don't know. I can't make any guarantees," Vulture said. "If it were just me, I would completely stand on your side, no matter how many people die. But my husband isn't willing. He'll do his best to save everyone in the western region." Young Dingtian already felt an extremely dangerous aura. Previously, when Wu Yuming was still calm and collected, this dangerous aura hadn't reached its peak yet. And when he displayed the noble aura of bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying the fate of mankind, this extremely dangerous aura suddenly erupted. "All right, I'm leaving," Vulture said. "Even though I don't owe you anything anymore, and even though you killed my brother, I still have to say this. However, I still have to say something. When you are destroyed, my husband's netherworld sea will still accept you and your wife's refuge. In fact, that includes your mother-in-law Shimen." After saying this, Vulture turned around and flew into the distance. Young Dingtian clenched his fists tightly. Vulture's last sentence had almost revealed the most vicious conjecture in his heart. When a person suspected another person, they would speculate that the other person's malice to the extreme. From today onwards, from this moment onwards, young Dingtian and the others would no longer have this sworn sister. They would completely cut off all ties. But at this moment, cutting off all ties with Vulture was a small matter. The big matter was that the Vulture sect was already prepared to enter the game. So what were they going to do? Vulture had already released the malice of the Vulture Palace. The key point now was, what would the Vulture sect do? Young Dingtian didn't have time to look at the submarines and torpedoes. He directly gathered everyone in the Council of Light and informed them of the Vulture's attitude. In short, the Vulture sect will take action this time. But the key point is, how will they do it? Young Dingtian asked. Think about it. What will the Vulture sect do? Will they directly participate in the war? Qin Huayu asked. No, Qin Wanqiu said. This war belongs to Zhu Qingzhu. The Vulture sect doesn't even care about Zhu Qingzhu. How can they play a supporting role? That's right, so they will definitely cooperate. They will use a small amount of force to change the war situation, Song Chunhua said. Then what is the key point of the war situation? Yang Dingtian said. Our submarine tactics and kerosene tactics have already been exposed. Once the submarine tactics are exposed, they will be easily broken. And the Demon Vulture Army's kerosene tactic is very difficult to break. I can't even think of a way to break it. Everyone nodded. Yang Dingtian had already harvested 4 million kilograms of kerosene, and it was still increasing. When the war started, it was likely to double. So when the time came, it might be close to 10,000 tons of kerosene. These kerosene bombs would be placed on the big ships at the back, and then the Demon Vulture Army would be like fighter jets, dropping the bombs back and forth from the sky. This was the most primitive aircraft carrier battle group. This kind of tactic was almost unsolvable for Zhu Qingzhu, because even if the kerosene was shattered and detonated in the sky, it would still float above their heads and burn everything. Yang Dingtian asked many people if there was a way to break the kerosene bomb tactic. In the end, there was no way. Everyone said that there was no way to break it, unless the entire Central State Fleet dived into the sea. But the Central State Fleet had millions of troops. It was a dream to dive into the sea. Yes, the key to the war situation is our kerosene tactic. Song Chunhua said. If Zhu Qingzhu can't break our kerosene tactic, he will definitely pay a huge price in exchange for the support of the Vulture sect. Then, does the Vulture sect have a way to break the kerosene tactic? Everyone shook their heads, indicating that they didn't know. The Vulture sect was too mysterious. They were completely isolated from the world and couldn't be understood. The Vulture sect has a way to break the kerosene tactic. Yang Dingtian said. What way? Song Chunhua asked. Directly kill the entire Demon Vulture Army. Yang Dingtian said. They have an air force that is not inferior to the Demon Vulture Army, called the Black Vulture. Their size may not be as big as the Demon Vulture Army, but their flying speed and fighting quality are not inferior to the Demon Vulture Army. More importantly, their numbers may be in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. Destroying the Demon Vulture Army is easy. Suddenly, everyone's expression changed. Kuei Ning said, Is this possible? It is already very difficult for our earth-splitting city to raise 3,000 demon vultures. Vulture Palace can raise tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. The Vulture sect feeds the black vultures with the savages of the southern barbarian continent. Every year, the black vultures eat millions of savages. Yang Dingtian said. Suddenly, everyone's expression changed. In fact, when Vulture said that Wu Yuming was compassionate and would save as many people as he could, Wu Yuming's expression changed. Yang Dingtian wanted to reply, then why didn't he save the savages of the southern barbarian continent first? Every year, millions of people died to feed the black vultures. Wasn't that more cruel? But in the end, he did not reply. If he did, he would fall into the style of arguing with a little girl. Perhaps in the eyes of the Vulture sect, the savages of the southern barbarian continent were not humans at all, but animals. But in this case, it would be considered as directly participating in the war. Song Chunhua asked. Yang Dingtian said, the Vulture sect can borrow troops. They can lend 3,000 black vultures to Zhu Qingzhu, and let the Golden Eagle warriors ride the black vultures to fight. At that time, the Vulture sect can still stay out of the war. Kuei Ning said, Sect Master, who will win a battle between 1,000 demon vultures and 3,000 black vultures? Yang Dingtian said, I don't know, but I have seen the black vultures. Their fierce temperament is unforgettable. They are as fast as the demon vultures, and as hard as steel. Most importantly, they are even more vicious. Kuei Ning said, we can't just sit here and wait for death. I will go back to the earth-splitting city to ask for reinforcements. If 1,000 demon vultures are not enough, we will send 2,000, 3,000. Even if we have to bring back all the demon vultures, even if there is not a single earth-splitting city left, we must win this war. Yang Dingtian closed his eyes for a moment, It could be said that, even if it was just a few million Zhongzhou navy, Yang Dingtian already had a way to win. But if the vulture sect lent Zhu Qingzhu 10,000 black vultures, it would be a nightmare for the western region. Yang Dingtian felt good when he attacked others, but once he was attacked by others, it would be very miserable. The black vultures could also fly at a height of 10,000 meters, and Xiao Xiao could not reach them in the sea. After an hour, Yang Dingtian and Kuei Ning rode on the demon vultures and rushed to the earth-splitting city at the fastest speed to ask for more demon vultures. On the way to the earth-splitting city, Kuei Ning suddenly said, "Sect Master, now the demon vultures are actually under my aunt's command, so whether we can get reinforcements or not depends on my aunt Kuei Qing." Yang Dingtian said, "I believe in Miss Kuei Qing's wisdom." Kuei Ning's expression suddenly became strange and said, "My mother once wrote me a letter, asking me to probe your intentions." Seeing Kuei Ning's strange expression, Yang Dingtian asked, "What intentions? You also know that my aunt is already 30 years old, but she still lives alone." Kuei Ning said, "Then, my mother always wanted her to find a man, but my aunt did not like anyone and was not willing to marry. So my mother had a crazy idea, that is to ask you to give Aunt Kuei Qing a child." "Ah!" Yang Dingtian exclaimed, and almost fell into the sea. Madame Kuei Si did this kind of thing for her aunt? This is too absurd and bizarre, isn't it? Seeing Yang Dingtian's reaction, Kuei Ning said, "I also feel that it is absurd, so I did not pay attention to my mother's letter. But my mother said that Aunt Kuei Qing seems to have a good impression of you, and was not very resistant to this suggestion. So this time, it is rare for us to come to the earth-splitting city. Why don't you consider?" I also do not want to see Aunt Kuei Qing alone." Yang Dingtian was completely speechless. You are disrespecting your aunt the most." "That's true." Kuei Ning said, "Why don't you just directly marry my earth-splitting city, and marry Aunt Kuei Qing as well? Then borrowing troops will be more justified." Yang Dingtian's heart suddenly trembled. Chapter 544. 12 hours later, Yang Dingtian arrived at the earth-splitting city. At this moment, the coastline of the earth-splitting city was filled with all kinds of cannons. These things gave the earth-splitting city a huge sense of security. Moreover, the earth-splitting city had once held a drill and invited many forces from the Central Plains to participate. Hundreds of ships acted as the enemy and prepared to land on the earth-splitting city. Then, thousands of cannons on the coastline fired at the same time, although the distance was not long enough and the shots were not accurate enough. But after an hour, these hundreds of ships were still turned into a pile of debris. The cannons that Yang Dingtian gave to the earth-splitting city were just for show. They were almost like iron buckets, and there were very few cannons. However, it was enough to shift the forces of Zhu Qingzhu's army to the western world and temporarily not attack the earth-splitting city. At the border between the earth-splitting city and the Cloud Sky Pavilion, Yang Dingtian sent more than 1,000 demon dragon warriors. It was enough to defend against the attacks from the Cloud Sky Pavilion, because if the Cloud Sky Pavilion attacked, it could only be the Demon Lion army. Although the Demon Lion army of the Cloud Sky Pavilion was very powerful and could walk on the mountain peak like it was flat ground, it was still not the Demon Dragon army's match. Yang Dingtian's two actions had basically allowed Earth Fisher City to sit back and relax. They could now wholeheartedly attack the Central Continent's army in the Western world. This time, Yang Dingtian landed in the earth-splitting city and received an even more enthusiastic welcome. 1,000 Demon Eagle army soldiers lined up in the air to welcome him. After landing, the entire coastline fired cannons to greet Yang Dingtian, their closest ally, the highest greeting. Not only that, all the members of the earth-splitting city's Elder Guild, and even Kuei Si's wife came to welcome him personally. The scene was so grand that Yang Dingtian was completely overwhelmed. Then, amidst the cheers of the crowd, Yang Dingtian sat on the Demon Eagle King and flew into the earth-splitting city's main castle accompanied by Kuei Si's wife and many elders. However, the Demon Eagle army's commander, Kuei Qing, did not appear throughout the entire process. Yang Dingtian, could not help but think of the words that Kuei Ning said on the sea surface. His heart could it be that it was complete? Otherwise, as the commander of the Demon Eagle army, Kuei Qing would definitely appear. Arriving at the earth-splitting city lord's castle, young Ding Tian had yet to open his mouth to discuss matters when he received an incomparably warm and grand reception. Every elder in the earth-splitting city gave young Ding Tian the highest respect and gratitude. Countless people toasted young Ding Tian. Countless delicacies were served like flowing water. Almost everyone was smiling from ear to ear. Even though young Ding Tian was a 4-star level 9 grandmaster, he could not help but feel a little tipsy at this moment. When the banquet was at its climax, young Ding Tian could not help but ask, why don't I see Commander Kuei Qing? Madame Kuei said, ignore her. She's just like that. Young Ding Tian, Madam Elders, young Ding Tian is here because he has something to ask of you. The great elder of the earth-shattering city said, you and I are one family, there's no need to talk about requests. If City Lord Yang has anything to say, feel free to tell me. Young Ding Tian smiled and said, because of certain reasons, the Vulture sect is no longer neutral, and has already interfered in the battle between us and Zhu Qingzhu. Therefore, it's very likely that they will send out the Vulture sect's Black Eagle army. In order to defend against the possible Black Eagle army, I want to borrow another 1,500 Demon Eagle army from the earth-splitting city. Young Ding Tian was very straightforward. Ha ha ha. The great elder laughed and said, a mere 1,500 Demon Eagle army is nothing compared to City Lord Yang's 5,000 cannons and Demon Dragon army. Not to mention 1,500. Even if you borrow the remaining 2,000 Demon Eagle army, it's not a problem. Immediately, Yang Ding Tian and Kuei Ning were overjoyed, and the worries in their hearts were relieved. However, City Lord Yang, you don't need these 1,500 Demon Eagle army anymore. The great elder of the earth-splitting city laughed. Yang Ding Tian's heart trembled slightly, but he still smiled and said, oh? Why is that? The great elder of the earth-splitting city said, 4 hours ago, young Lord Wu Yuming came to the earth-splitting city and agreed to stop the war between you and Zhu Qingzhu. He is also willing to mediate between us and Zhu Qingzhu. Therefore, there is no need to fight the war. To the peace that is about to come, how about we drink a toast? Yang Ding Tian's expression changed drastically. No wonder Yang Ding Tian was treated so grandly. It was because of a guilty conscience. The great elder raised the wine cup in his hand high and looked at Yang Ding Tian, who had no reaction at all. He suddenly felt awkward and raised his cup to the other elders. To the peace cheers. Immediately, the elders raised their cups and saluted. Yang Ding Tian still held the wine cup in his hand, but Kuei Ning had already fiercely slammed the cup down. She looked at her mother and said coldly, Mother, is this also your intention? Where is Aunt? Madame Kuei whispered to Yang Ding Tian, City Lord Yang, please come with me. We can talk in private. Inside the room, there were only young Ding Tian and Madame Kuei. Suddenly, Madame Kuei knelt down and sobbed. City Lord Yang, please save my husband. Young Ding Tian hurried forward and helped her up. Madam, you are my elder. Please don't do this. I already know where City Lord Kuei Si is, and I will do my best. Madame Kuei sobbed. Not long ago, Wu Yuming came to visit. He said he didn't want to see millions of casualties and blood flowing into the sea. Therefore, he wanted to mediate the war between the western regions and Zhu Qingzhu, and also mediate the conflict between Earth-splitting city and Zhu Qingzhu. What did he say? Yang Ding Tian asked. He said that the matter of Kuei Qing killing Zhu Qingzhu's illegitimate son will be written off. Zhu Qingzhu can announce to the Tiando League headquarters that he will not pursue any responsibility for Earth-splitting city, and will not attack Earth-splitting city. Madame Kuei continued. Furthermore, he promised that as long as you are willing to negotiate with Zhu Qingzhu, he can force Zhu Qingzhu to give up on attacking the western regions. Yang Ding Tian asked, what are the terms of the negotiation? Dissolve the Council of Light and admit the illegality of the Tiando League, Madame Kuei said. Young Lord Wu Yuming said that these are Zhu Qingzhu's terms, not his. Yang Ding Tian clenched his fists behind his back. City Lord Yang, Isn't this what you want? Madame Kuei said. Your original intention of establishing the Council of Light was to unify the western regions and save Earth-splitting city and Sky Cloud Pavilion in the name of justice. Now that there is no need for war, your goals have been achieved. That's right. After winning the war at Sky Cloud City, Yang Dingtian had set his sights on Central State. Because Zhu Qingzhu wanted to sweep through Earth-splitting city and Sky Cloud Pavilion, completely unifying Central State. Yang Dingtian was indebted to Earth-splitting city's Kuei-Si, so Yang Dingtian could not sit by and do nothing. However, Cloud Sky City alone was not enough to save Earth-splitting city and Kuei-Si. Moreover, they lacked sufficient status. Therefore, Yang Dingtian unified the western regions and established the Council of Light. Now, according to Madame Kuei, everything was indeed the best situation. Now that the western regions had been unified, Zhu Qingzhu would no longer attack Earth-splitting city and Sky Cloud Pavilion. However, how could things be so simple? Right now, Yang Dingtian was finally convinced and had witnessed Ning Wuming's words. Ning Wuming had said that Yang Dingtian's victory over Qin Chichi and him was not necessarily a good thing. This way, Yang Dingtian would be able to avoid an even more terrifying enemy. Moreover, this enemy's methods were not purely evil. This person's methods were definitely mysterious and unfathomable, and extremely terrifying. The form of the battle would also become incomparably complicated. Now Yang Dingtian could already feel this point with incomparable clarity. Wu Yuming had already hit Yang Dingtian's vital point countless times. Almost every time, she had hit his vital point. In Vulture Sect, he had snatched the little princess's heart away from Vulture. In Sky Cloud Pavilion, he had stopped Sky Cloud Pavilion from joining the Council of Light, causing Yang Dingtian to lose his most powerful navy. Then through Vulture, he had planted the spirit ghost bird into Ling Wu's body, causing Yang Dingtian's submarine and kerosene tactics to be completely exposed. Now he had come to Earth-splitting city and was going to cause Yang Dingtian to lose his most important ally, Earth-splitting city. It could be said that every time he made a move, it was as light as a feather. He did not kill a single person. He only said a few words and gently lifted his finger. Just like that, he had ruthlessly hit Yang Dingtian's vital point, causing pain to seep into his bones. He had never fought Yang Dingtian head-on before, yet he had almost caused Yang Dingtian to fall into a desperate situation. He had never fought Yang Dingtian head-on before, yet Yang Dingtian had never won a single time. Moreover, the most frightening thing was that he had a very dignified reason to fight Yang Dingtian head-on. He had let everyone see his light, righteousness, and compassion. It was as if Yang Dingtian was the one who had sinned to the core. Taking a deep breath, Yang Dingtian said, Madame Zhu, the arrow has already been knocked on the bow. It has no choice but to fire. Madame Kuei-Si said, But this is a war that is destined to have no hope of victory. Your submarine and kerosene tactics have already been exposed. Zhu Qingzhu's strength is dozens of times more than yours. A young master from Vulture Sect had died in your hands. This has infuriated Vulture Sect, and they are already prepared to intervene in the war. Once Vulture Sect sends out their Black Vulture army, Earth Fisher City's Demon Vulture army of 3,000 will definitely be annihilated. Following that, Madame Kuei-Si spoke hesitantly. Also, the 5,000 cannons you sent over were just for show, to intimidate Zhu Qingzhu. They already know about it. Yang Dingtian asked slowly, Madame Kuei, do you believe Wu Yoming's words? Madame Kuei-Si did not speak. She said slowly, City Lord Yang, if it is because of this, we will not change our mind. The most important thing is that young Master Wu Yuming said that he has already found out my husband's whereabouts and is doing his best to rescue him. He said that no matter what Earth Fisher City says, he will rescue Kuei-Si. However, if Earth Fisher City can reach an agreement with Zhu Qingzhu, then they can release Kuei-Si within half a month. Yang Dingtian let out a sigh. So this was the trump card. However, Kuei-Si was originally in Vulture Palace's hands. How could he rescue her? However, it was clear that this was a condition. Previously, Yang Dingtian had asked everyone how Zhu Qingzhu would break the fire oil tactic. Yang Dingtian said that Vulture sect would borrow the Black Vulture army to destroy the Demon Vulture army. Now it seemed that Yang Dingtian had greatly underestimated the Vulture sect and Wu Yuming. They were not willing to give up their status at all. They were not even willing to borrow troops and directly mediate it from above. The other party's methods were completely like hanging antelopes by their horns, untraceable. Kuei-si was Earth Fisher City's biggest weakness. Once they used this trump card, they were not afraid that Earth Fisher City would not submit. I know about this matter. May I ask how long has Wu Yuming left, and where did he go? Yang Dingtian asked. He left for Cloud Sky Pavilion for 4 hours. Madame Kuei said. Got it. Yang Dingtian then said. Goodbye. An hour later, Yang Dingtian and Kuei Ning sat on the flying demon eagle and flew directly to Cloud Sky Pavilion. As Yin Kalin's previous arrogance had dissipated, Yang Dingtian no longer cared about Cloud Sky Pavilion's ban. He did not take a detour and flew directly from the border. 4 hours later, the two of them flew for 4,000 miles and crossed the border between Cloud Sky Pavilion and Earth Fisher City. They entered Cloud Sky Pavilion's territory at an altitude of over 10,000 meters. Entering Cloud Sky Plateau again, the scenery here was still magnificent and beautiful. High mountains and steep ridges, white snow. However, Yang Dingtian was not in the mood to appreciate it. Soon, the White Crane cavalry of Cloud Sky Pavilion stopped and looked at Yang Dingtian and Kuei Ning in the sky. They were incomparably angry, but could not do anything. They could only watch from below and surround them. After another 4 hours, Yang Dingtian and Kuei Ning's flying demon eagle mounts landed on Cloud Sky Pavilion of Great Snow Mountain. Yang Dingtian saw Yin Zhenu again, this contradictory woman. Her temperament was as indifferent as dust. Her appearance was as beautiful as peaches and plums. Her figure was curvy in the front and perky behind. City Governor Yang, are you openly trampling on the dignity of Cloud Sky Pavilion? Yin Zhenu asked coldly. Where is Wu Yuming? Yang Dingtian asked. Yin Zhenu's face turned cold and said, she is inside, talking to my master. You wait here. When they are done, I will go in and report. There is no need, Yang Dingtian said calmly, and walked into the main hall at the peak of the mountain. He pushed the door open. How dare you? Yin Zhenu was furious and rushed forward like a bolt of lightning. Yang Dingtian swung his arm. Boom! Instantly, a storm swept out and pushed Yin Zhenu dozens of meters away. Then, Yang Dingtian suddenly stepped forward and pushed the door open with his palm. City Governor Yang Dingtian, do you know what education is? Yin Kalin said coldly. I feel guilty towards you, but I don't owe you anything. Don't try to teach you on behalf of your parents. Yang Dingtian didn't bother about Yin Kalin. Instead, he spoke to Wu Yuming below. I came to the Cloud Sky Pavilion not to talk to Lord Kalin, but to pursue young Lord Wu Yuming. Brother Yuming, let's talk. Wu Yuming said to Yang Dingtian. I came to Cloud Sky Pavilion for no other reason than to tell Master Kalin the good news about City Governor Kuei-si. After that, I plan to go to the west to talk to you. Now that you are here, let's talk. Then please, Yang Dingtian said. Please. Wu Yuming stood up. His handsome face still had a gentle smile on it, and his robe was still spotless. That's right, it was a cloth robe and not silk. There were no luxurious decorations on his body. And his face, his temperament, was the best decoration. The two of them walked out of the main hall, and slowly walked away. They walked on the mountain path, and stepped on the white snow. Yang Dingtian's foot landed on the ground, dirtying the snow, and creating a deep pit. On the other hand, Wu Yuming walked on the snow without a single trace. The two of them walked side by side, and their postures were completely different. One was like an ordinary person, while the other was like a fairy. When they walked on the steep path, one of them was a grandmaster, but his steps were still like a woodcutter's. He instinctively bent his back and lifted his feet. The other was like a breeze. Even if it was a steep cliff, he would still be able to pass through it like water. Yin Zhenu was a few miles away. When he saw the two of them, they had already become two black dots. However, he could still feel that their auras were like heaven and earth. Yin Zhenu sighed softly and shook his head. He frowned and swept away the dirty snow that Yang Dingtian had stepped on. This was the first real battle between Yang Dingtian and Wu Yuming, even though it was just a battle of words. Of course, it was only a battle of words. In terms of cultivation, the difference between the two of them was like heaven and earth. However, when facing Wu Yuming, even if it was just a battle of words, it was still a battle of words. Yang Dingtian had fought Wu Yuming indirectly before, and had never won. He had always been hit by Wu Yuming's attacks, and each time it was almost fatal. Then this time, it was a direct battle. The two of them walked slowly in the snow. They had already walked for dozens of miles. Almost 2 hours had passed and neither of them spoke. "Brother Yuming, what do you want?" Yang Dingtian suddenly asked. Yes, what did Wu Yuming want? Chapter 545. What do I want? What do you think? Wu Yuming asked. It can't be that you want peace in the world, less deaths, less bloodshed, right? Yang Dingtian said. Wu Yuming smiled faintly, then gently opened his palm. Immediately, Yang Dingtian's treasured sword flew directly into his hand. He gently stroked the soul sword that was close to the emperor grade. It had a color that was close to fire and gold. He slowly said, "It's really a good sword. Perhaps it's the best sword in the world." Then, as if he did not know martial arts, Wu Yuming gently waved Yang Dingtian's sword in the snow. Suddenly, the sword was like a flame, making Wu Yuming even more handsome. White like snow, red like fire. It looked as if Wu Yuming was the owner of this sword. Yang Dingtian, you are bright and sharp just like this sword. Wu Yuming slowly said. Then what about me? What do you think I look like? The wind in this mountain can't be seen through or touched, but it's everywhere. It can be incomparably gentle and incomparably sharp. Yang Dingtian said. That's a bit interesting. Wu Yuming said. But what you're saying is too strange. What am I? I'm the person you're looking at now, a person who holds a sword. Suddenly, Yang Dingtian's heart was furious, and he felt incomparably humiliated. He compared Yang Dingtian to a sharp sword, and then compared himself to the person who held the sword. Although there were no profanities in his words, it was the greatest trampling on people. To put it bluntly, you're just a tool. Yang Dingtian laughed coldly and said, You mean, I'm the sword in your hand? No, you're just one of the swords. Wu Yuming said indifferently. With a light toss, Yang Dingtian's soul sword flew back into Yang Dingtian's scabbard. This near-emperor-grade soul sword was a priceless treasure. Everyone coveted it, but Wu Yuming didn't care at all. She threw it back to Yang Dingtian. Then he broke a branch from the side. Like a person who did not know martial arts, he gently waved the withered branch. Suddenly, this withered branch seemed to have become a divine weapon. In his hand, the withered branch seemed to have sword intent and poetic sentiments. Look, your near-emperor-level soul sword in my hand is no different from this withered branch, Wu Yuming said. This sentence was an even greater trampling. Yang Dingtian did not answer. He had asked Wu Yuming what she wanted, and now he did not expect to get an answer. Yang Dingtian, we are now standing at the peak of the mountain. Can you see far enough? Wu Yuming asked. It is far enough, Yang Dingtian said. But, why do I feel that you are not by my side? I am the only one on the mountain peak. Wu Yuming said. You are clearly standing by my side, but I feel like you are standing at the foot of the mountain. You can't see anything. You can only see a place as big as my palm. Wu Yuming continued. Because the view is different, there is really nothing to talk about between us. When you are about the same height as me, you are welcome to chat with me. Now that we are not familiar with each other, let's not talk nonsense. Okay, it is time to go back. Let's talk about business. We will talk as we walk. Then, Wu Yuming walked back to the Cloud Sky Pavilion. Kuei Ning should not know that Qin Ji killed his wife, Nangong Xiuxiu. Wu Yuming said. Yes, Yang Dingtian said. In a while Earth-splitting city should ask you for the 1,000 Demon Eagle army. You can return it, Wu Yuming said. Okay, Yang Dingtian said. Wu Yuming was stunned. She did not expect Yang Dingtian to be so straightforward. If I don't return the 1,000 Demon Eagle army, the Vulture sect will lend 3 times the number of Black Eagles. At that time, the Demon Eagle army will be wiped out. It will not change anything, Yang Dingtian said. Yes, that is the reason. Wu Yuming said. Since you have returned the Demon Eagle army, the Vulture sect will not lend the Black Eagle army. Alright, that's all I have to say to you. Didn't you want to mediate between me and Zhu Qingzhu? Yang Dingtian sneered. Will you accept mediation? Wu Yuming asked. No, Yang Dingtian said. Then that is it. Wu Yuming said. It is because I have seen through you too clearly. I know that you will not accept mediation. That is why I will try my best to mediate. Yang Dingtian's heart could no longer be described with words. Ling Wu kept saying that she wanted to stop the war. Even Vulture kept saying that her husband was compassionate and wanted to stop the war and mediate. Even Madame Kuei said that she wanted to stop the war. It was as if Wu Yuming could suppress both sides and start the peace talks once she appeared. Now, Wu Yuming had revealed the cruelest truth with just one sentence. Peace talks. Dream on. Zhu Qingzhu's attack on the western region was not directly related to Yang Dingtian. He wanted to occupy the western region and plant the flag of evil ways in the sky above the tens of thousands of miles of land in the western region. As for Yang Dingtian splitting the Tiando League and establishing the Council of Light, it was just an excuse for Zhu Qingzhu to send his army. If he wanted to mediate, it was just an act. He had calculated that Yang Dingtian would not accept the conditions to dissolve the Council of Light. That was why he came to mediate. That was why he came to mediate with a compassionate heart, and with the safety of the people in the world as the reason. If Yang Dingtian wanted to stop the war, not only would they not mediate, they would also add fuel to the fire and worsen the situation, forcing both sides to start a war. Alright, I have wronged you in this war. I will make you lose miserably. But don't worry. I will not let you lose everything. Wu Yuming said indifferently. I know. After you suffer a crushing defeat in this war, even if most of your value is gone, there will still be some left. Goodbye. Wu Yuming's body floated up and flew directly toward the Cloud Sky Pavilion and entered the main hall. This time, Yang Dingtian did not barge in. Instead, he waited outside. Beside him was Yun Junyu, who had a cold expression. 15 minutes later, Yun Kalin personally sent Wu Yuming out. Brother Yang, goodbye. Wu Yuming flew and disappeared in the storm and snow. Yun Kalin looked at Yang Dingtian and said indifferently, Alright, City Lord Yang, you should leave too. The Cloud Sky Pavilion does not welcome you. Take care of yourself. Yang Dingtian replied. Subsequently, he rode on the Devil Eagle with Kuei Ning and flew towards the Earth Fisher City. Suddenly, Yun Kalin spoke from behind. Yang Dingtian, you rode on the Devil Eagle and barged into my Cloud Sky Pavilion. You have trampled on my Cloud Sky Pavilion's dignity. I will definitely punish you. No matter what you want to do, don't find excuses. Yang Dingtian said indifferently. Subsequently, he rode on the Devil Eagle with Kuei Ning and left the Cloud Sky Pavilion, returning to the Earth Fisher City. Back to the Earth Fisher City. The Earth Fisher City's Grand Elder said, City Lord Yang, the possibility of a ceasefire is very high. However, the western region is still facing the threat of Zhu Qingzhu's 8 million army. Therefore, the western region needs these 5,000 cannons and 1,000 Devil Dragon Legion, more than our Earth Fisher City. Therefore, we cannot be so selfish. When you return this time, bring back the 5,000 cannons and Devil Dragon Legion. We will always remember your deep friendship in our hearts. After speaking, the Earth Fisher City's Grand Elder looked at Yang Dingtian nervously. He wanted to return the 5,000 fake cannons and 1,000 Devil Dragon Legion. He only had one objective, which was to return the 1,000 Devil Eagle Legion led by Kuei Ning. Of course, because both parties had a good relationship, he couldn't be too direct. However, if Yang Dingtian was to act dumb, he would have no choice but to shed all pretense of cordiality and ask for the 1,000 Devil Eagle Legion back. That's fine too, Yang Dingtian said softly. City Lord Yang's benevolence and generosity are indeed unparalleled. The Grand Elder said. Kuei Ning stood at the side and felt that something was wrong. This time, Madame Kuei didn't appear. After leaving Earth Fisher City, there were already 2,000 Devil Eagle Legion waiting there. The cannons on the shoreline of Earth Fisher City had all been dug up and carried north by the Devil Eagle Legion. There were also more than 1,000 Devil Dragon Legion that had begun to assemble and prepare to disembark. They were all on the fastest crystal ships. Yang Dingtian patiently waited for the 1,000 Devil Dragon Legion to board the ships. Then, together with the 2,000 Devil Eagle Legion, he escorted the 1,000 Devil Dragon Legion back to the western region. Because they had to protect the fleet below, the 2,000 Devil Eagle Legion flew very slowly. Kuei Ning finally couldn't help but ask, "Sect Master, what happened?" "I'll tell you when we return," Yang Dingtian said. After flying for dozens of miles, a devil eagle suddenly chased after them. A beautiful woman sat on it. It was Kuei Qing. From the beginning to the end, she didn't appear. Now she had caught up. "Yang Dingtian, let's talk," Kuei Qing said. Yang Dingtian flew over. Then, the two devil eagles flew into the sky and separated from the main group. "City Lord Yang, I've always been against it. I've always been against it." Kuei Qing's eyes were red. But sister-in-law knelt in front of me and asked me to save my brother. If Earth Fisher City doesn't withdraw, they will kill my brother. Once Earth Fisher City withdraws, Wu Yuming said that she will bring my brother back. Wu Yuming said that she will release him. She should release him, Yang Dingtian said. I've always been against it. I even wanted to bring the Devil Eagle Legion to the western region. But when sister-in-law knelt in front of me, I was powerless to stop it. Kuei Qing cried. This woman had never cried before. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Then she apologized countless times. It's nothing, Yang Dingtian said. Then I'll go back. Take care. Yang Dingtian smiled at her. Then the Devil Eagle King swooped down and joined the main group to escort the Devil Dragon Legion back to the western region. 2 days and 2 nights later, Yang Dingtian escorted the main group back to Iron Furnace City. Countless citizens of Cloud Sky City, who were building the defensive line, and soldiers loyal to the Council of Light cheered when they saw the Devil Eagle Legion that covered the sky. Originally, City Lord Yang had 1,000 Devil Eagle Legions and was almost invincible. Now there were so many more. Wouldn't that make him even more invincible? Instantly, the morale of countless citizens rose. But they wouldn't see that in the dead of night, the Devil Eagle Legions all rose into the sky in the dark. They left the western region and flew towards Earth Fisher City. And it wasn't just the 2,000 Devil Eagle Legions that left. The 1,000 Devil Eagle Legions that had been protecting the western region also officially left. When Yang Dingtian told Kuei Ning to bring the 1,000 Devil Eagle Legions back to Earth Fisher City and completely leave the war between the western region and Zhengzhou, Kuei Ning, who had been suppressed for a few days, finally exploded. He didn't say anything. He directly placed his sword on his neck and said that if he was allowed to go back, he would die. Kuei Ning wasn't the only one who had such thoughts. The 1,000 Devil Eagle warriors also had such thoughts. After fighting side by side for a few months and going through life and death together, they had already formed a deep friendship with the brothers here. Here they had gained countless precious things: worship, victory, value, passion, and so on. Even though they obeyed Yang Dingtian and worshipped Yang Dingtian, Yang Dingtian was never high and mighty. He was always at the forefront of the battle. Not only was he their leader, but he was also their life and death brother. Yang Dingtian had already won their hearts. To put it bluntly, the 1,000 Devil Eagle warriors' recognition of Cloud Sky City had even surpassed that of Earth Fisher City. The Devil Eagle Legions belonged to the sky and belonged to the battle. Now, asking them to leave before the war was really more painful than killing them. Yang Dingtian and Kuei Ning said 2 sentences. The first sentence was that the Devil Eagle Legions that he led weren't fleeing before the war. It was a strategic departure because if the Devil Eagle Legions didn't leave, Kuei Si wouldn't be able to survive. Moreover, the Vulture Sect's Black Eagle Legions would participate in the war. The second sentence was that in the demon area, he saw Nangong Xiuxiu's corpse. It was Qin Ji who killed her. They only stabbed Qin Ji once and didn't kill her to avenge Nangong Xiuxiu. Hearing the news of Nangong Xiuxiu's death, Kuei Ning's tears fell. The light in his eyes was incomparably painful and complicated. He shook his head and said, It's good that she's dead. It's over. What's wrong? Yang Dingtian asked. She has someone else in her heart. Kuei Ning said painfully. She ran away from home to fly away with him. Who is it? Yang Dingtian asked. I don't know. Kuei Ning shook his head. Forget her. Yang Dingtian said. After this war, I'll choose a marriage for you. Kuei Ning smiled embarrassedly and said. Okay, I'll wait for you to choose a wife for me. Definitely. Yang Dingtian hugged his arm tightly. Can we win this time? Can we win? Kuei Ning asked. We can win. Yang Dingtian said decisively. This time, I'll give the whole world an even more shocking victory. I'll give Zhu Qingzhu and Wu Yuming a resounding slap in the face. I believe you. I'll always believe you. I'll always be loyal to you. Kuei Ning said. I'll be in Splitting Earth City waiting for that slap. I'll help you see the expressions of those stupid elders. Good brother. Yang Dingtian said with a smile. Then, the 3,000 Demon Eagle army flapped their wings in the night sky and left the west. Yang Dingtian stood on the city wall and looked at the black figures leaving. His eyes were bitter. Kuei Ning, who had left Yin City, couldn't help but cry on the back of the Demon Eagle. The next day, Wu Yuming announced to the world that because Yang Dingtian refused to dissolve the Council of Light, his mediation had failed. The 8 million Zhongzhou army that had gathered officially boarded the ships. The war broke out. Chapter 546. Of course, Ning Wuming's words were not that simple. Other than the fact that Yang Dingtian had refused, the mediation had failed. In addition, Ning Wuming represented the Vulture sect and the Sea of Hades to announce that they would end the war with the smallest price. They would work hard to prevent this war from turning into a world war between the Western region and the Central region. In short, they had to make sure that fewer people died and less blood was shed in this war. According to his original words, since I can't stop this tragedy, I will make it smaller and the process faster. It was unknown how many people shed tears of gratitude when they heard these words. But who would know the cruelty behind these words? Was there a way to make the tragedy smaller and the process faster? Was there a way to make fewer people die and less blood flow? It was very simple. Yang Dingtian's army was completely annihilated at sea. Then, they could not stop the Central Region's army from landing. The Central Region's army would use the fastest time to completely occupy the Western region. Wu Yoming's announcement had just been made. The Great Elder of the Fisher City announced in the Central region that the Fisher City would remain neutral in this war and would not participate in any side. However, he still hoped that City Lord Yang Dingtian would accept the mediation and dissolve the Council of Light. This way the war would not break out. The Sky Cloud Pavilion also announced that they would remain neutral in this war. Moreover, they condemned Yang Dingtian's stubbornness. They could not even guarantee that the Sky Cloud Pavilion would work hard to stop this war when the situation required it. The Sky Cloud Pavilion's words were not clear, but the meaning was clear. Because of Yang Dingtian's offense, the Sky Cloud Pavilion remained neutral, but they could not guarantee what they would do next. After all, peace was the most important thing. The gathering of 8 million soldiers for an expedition was an incomparably huge project. Almost all the forces in the Central region had sent their elites to participate in the war. The Northern Central region, the Great Central region, and the Southern Central region. Almost all the docks and ports had been turned into huge military camps. Every day, countless soldiers boarded the warships. Looking down at the Central region, it was densely packed with black soldiers. Zhu Qingzhu had given everything he had for this war. For the sake of seizing the Western region, 8 million soldiers, more than 10,000 warships of various types. That's right, more than 10,000 ships. There had never been such a scene in the history of Earth. In the early civilizations of Earth, the largest population of each country was only in the tens of millions, and the armies they sent out were only in the hundreds of thousands. In the modern times, the United States repeatedly carried out the largest scale of expeditions across the sea. From World War II to the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Gulf War. There were 2 expeditions that reached the million level. The rest were all expeditions that involved hundreds of thousands of soldiers. However, at this time, Earth's warships were already incomparably huge. from a few thousand tons to tens of thousands of tons. Therefore, during the American expedition, the number of ships that were dispatched was only in the thousands. Therefore, the simultaneous deployment of tens of thousands of warships was only a legend in the Earth era. But in the Chaos world, it became reality. Of the 10,000-plus warships, there were more than 2,000 battleships. More than half of the warships that weighed more than 500 tons, amounting to more than 3,000. The Western world, on the other hand, barely had 100 or so large ships after some repairs. The largest ship in the Central State weighed more than 6,000 tons. The largest ship in the Western world was 1,200 tons. In addition to the 8 million troops and more than 10,000 warships, the Central State was also fully equipped with more than 15,000 giant crystal crossbows and 40,000 medium-sized crystal crossbows. They could completely seal off any attack in the air, unless it was a high-altitude attack. Moreover, that was not all. There were also more than 80,000 flying cavalry legions. The Vulture Sex Black Vulture Legion did not move, but that did not mean that the Central State did not have an air force. It just did not have an ace air force. In the entire Central State, all the combat flying cavalry were gathered, and there were more than 80,000 flying cavalry legions. Among them, the 10,000 Golden Eagle Legion was the ace army. The Eagle Nest had lost 30,000 Golden Eagle Legion in the Cloud Sky City 3 times, completely damaging their foundation. Now they had done their best and still sent out 10,000 Golden Eagle Legion. Therefore, the combat strength of the Central State was roughly as follows: 8 million troops, 13,000 warships and 2,000 battleships, 15,000 giant crystal crossbows, 40,000 medium-sized crystal crossbows, 80,000 air legions, and 10,000 Golden Eagle Legion. The combat strength of the Western world was roughly as follows: 3 million troops, 50,000 air legions, 6,000 cannons, 10,000 giant crystal crossbows, 20,000 medium-sized crystal crossbows, 18,000 miniature crystal crossbows, 800 different types of warships, and 200 battleships. Of course, including the extremely crude submarines, there were more than 500 ships. From the looks of it, there was not much difference between the forces. That was because the Northwest Qin City and the world society had almost given their all, especially the Northwest Qin City, as the world's largest territory and the world's wealthiest. It was not without reason. The crystal crossbows and the flying cavalry legions alone were equivalent to a small half of the Central State. However, the military strength of the Western world was mostly on land. These troops and the crystal crossbows could not reach the sea. Therefore, in the Western world, there were only 100,000 troops, 2,000 medium-sized anti-air crystal crossbows, 20,000 flying cavalry, and 800 small ships that could fight the Central State Army on the sea. It was not even 1/10 of the Central State Army. Yen City, the temporary headquarters of the Council of Light. Sovereign, we cannot win the naval battle. There is no hope. Qiu Wanjie was the first to speak. Hearing his pessimistic tone, everyone turned to look at him. The Demon Eagle Legion has left, and the kerosene tactic cannot be used. We have already lost this naval battle. Our naval strength is less than 1/100th of Zhu Qingzhu's. There is no way we can win, Qiu Wanjie said. Then are you still going to surrender? Song Xiao asked angrily. For some reason, Song Zhao's stubbornness was very prominent, no matter if it was the evil ways or the Council of Light. When he was working with the evil ways, the others were just putting on a show when they attacked Cloud Sky City. Only Song Xiao went all out and went south to the Poison Strait to give Cloud Sky City a fatal blow. After joining the Council of Light, he was also extremely stubborn and did not even consider changing sides. Qiu Wanjie knew Song Zhao's personality and did not bicker with him. He continued, "My opinion is that we should not fight on the sea. If the entire army is wiped out, it will be a huge blow to the morale. We should fight on land and wait for them to come ashore." Song Chunhua said, "On the surface, we have 3 million soldiers, but in reality, those who are truly loyal to the Council of Light barely number 1 million. As for the rest, once the Central State Army arrives, it would be good if they did not surrender. The entire western region, has hundreds of thousands of miles of coastline. We can't block or defend against them. Xiao said. Then let's gather all of our forces in a few cities. With Yan City, West Prefecture City, South Prefecture City, Qin City, Cloud Sky City, and Ba City as strongholds, let the 3 million soldiers enter the cities and guard them. This way, our cannons will be able to display their greatest advantage. Qin Huayu said. This way, we will have to give up 90% of our territory and 70% of our citizens. We will lose even if we don't fight. Moreover, without the Demon Eagle Legion, the enemy's Golden Eagle Legion will be invincible. The cannons will be easily destroyed. Xiao said. This won't work, that won't work, then what should we do? Xiao used to be very cunning, and never said anything that would offend others. Because after killing Zhu Hongli, there was no way out. Instead, he became more direct with his words. I still say the same thing. Annihilate the enemy on the sea. Annihilate the entire Central State Army on the sea. Don't let a single soldier come ashore. Yang Dingtian said. Instantly, everyone looked at Yang Dingtian in astonishment. Did he have a problem with his brain, because of the series of blows he received? The enemy has over 10,000 ships, while you only have a few hundred. The enemy has close to 100,000 air forces, while you have less than 10,000. Annihilating the enemy on the sea, is this a dream? If the Western Region's army and the Central State Army were to be compared, it would be 1 to 3. But if it was a comparison of sea power, the Central State Army was 100 times stronger than the Western Region. If they didn't fight on land and used the advantage of strong cities and cannons to fight a naval battle, they would be stupid. And most importantly, the Western Region no longer had an ace air force. Earth-splitting City had already abandoned the Western Region. Yang Dingtian looked at everyone and said, regarding this naval battle, I have absolute confidence in winning. The most important thing is, how do we annihilate the enemy's air force? Also, after the Central Continent Army is completely annihilated at sea, how are we going to capture and rescue the ordinary soldiers? We need to gather all the ships, because these several million soldiers of the Central Continent Army might very well be our core strength in the future world-destroying war. When Yang Dingtian said this, everyone was completely stunned. Even Qin Huayu and Song Chunhua, who trusted Yang Dingtian the most, were stunned. In a naval battle, the disparity in power was 1 to 1. There was no hope of winning at all. 10,000 soldiers would be annihilated. Now, the naval battle hadn't even started, but Yang Dingtian was already preparing to capture and rescue the Central State Army. This was absolutely crazy. Yang Dingtian continued. I've already said it clearly. In this war, we only have one enemy, and that is the evil ways Zhu Qingzhu. As long as we defeat Zhu Qingzhu, most of the Central State Army will stand on our side. They will become the main force to resist the evil ways in the future. Therefore, this battle is different from the battle at Cloud Sky City. In the battle at Cloud Sky City, we need to destroy the enemy as much as possible. In the naval battle at Central State, we need to completely defeat them and not kill more people. Suddenly, Song Xiao couldn't help but say, My lord, saving people is another matter. Let's win first. I don't see any hope of winning this naval battle. Actually, the naval battle isn't completely impossible. Song Chunhua suddenly said, if we modify the crystal crossbows and use them to throw barrels of kerosene, we can still burn the Central State Army. In addition to our submarine troops, this naval battle can be won. When Song Chunhua said this, everyone's eyes lit up. After Earth-splitting City abandoned the Council of Light, the Demon Vulture Army retreated, which was a heavy blow to everyone present. They almost couldn't breathe, and even felt like the sky was falling down. One must know that once the submarine tactic was exposed, it was very easy to be destroyed. Therefore, the Council of Light placed all their hopes on the kerosene tactic. However, with Earth-splitting City's betrayal and the Demon Vulture Army's retreat, the kerosene tactic was instantly ineffective. Therefore, the entire naval battle fell into a hopeless situation. Now Song Chunhua proposed a new idea, which was to modify the crystal crossbows to throw barrels of kerosene. Instantly, Everyone looked at Qiu Wanjia, because he was a weapon expert. Owner Qiu, is it possible? Song Chunhua asked. Aya, why didn't I think of that? Qiu Wanjia said, it's totally possible. Moreover, the modification isn't difficult. If you don't pay attention to accuracy, it can be thrown in a curve for 50 miles. Then it's done. Qin Huayu said. Central State has more than 10,000 warships, but they can't be used. Once they catch fire, there's no way to save them. This naval battle can be fought. Everyone was instantly excited. An all-out naval battle was a strategy that had been set long ago. Of course, it wasn't impossible to fight on land. If the Western world was fully united, it wasn't impossible to defeat the 8 million troops of Central State. However, although the Western world looked united on the surface, it was actually a piece of scattered sand. There was no way to gather their strength. Once the battle started, who knew how many people would lead the way? Moreover, once the naval battle started, it was destined to be a long battle. It would become a super large-scale war between Central State and the Western world. In the end, East State would also be involved, and it would evolve into a world war. The Legion of Doom hadn't arrived yet, and the Tiando League was already fighting a world war with itself. That would be a joke. Yang Dingtian would also become a sinner. Yang Dingtian naturally had the confidence to win, because he had Xiao Xiao, the ancient giant beast. However, he wouldn't reveal this top-secret killing weapon. Even at the highest meeting of the Council of Light, he wouldn't reveal it. The blow of Ling Wu leaking the secret was really too big. Moreover, if they could rely on the Western world's strength and wisdom to defeat Central State's army, that would be even better. Alright, we have no less than 5 million caddies of kerosene barrels. It's more than enough to burn more than 10,000 warships of Central State. Song Chunhua said, Sect Master, let's modify the crystal crossbows immediately and set sail immediately. Okay, Yang Dingtian said. From now on, we'll completely modify the crystal crossbows. All the large warships will only be equipped with crystal crossbows and kerosene shells. The faster crystal warships will be equipped with cannons. After that, gather all the warships of the Western world and set sail several hundred li behind the battlefield. Prepare to rescue people. Yes. Although everyone still felt strange, they still accepted the order. Song Chunhua also flew towards Luofu City at the first moment. Luofu City was a small to medium-sized castle 300 li away from Yin City. It was already completely empty inside. All of it was used to store kerosene barrels. No less than 5 million caddies. More than 100,000 kerosene barrels were placed inside. In fact, the kerosene barrels weren't completely metal barrels anymore. Because there was really no time to make so many metal barrels, many wooden barrels were also made. More than 100,000 kerosene barrels were completely an incomparably huge gunpowder warehouse. Previously, it was the key to victory in the naval battle. Therefore, Luofu City had completely become a strategic location. Previously, no less than 500 Demon Vulture Legion hovered above Luofu City every day. Not even a bird was allowed to enter. As for Song Chunhua, she stayed in Luofu City day and night, looking after all the kerosene barrels. Not only that, Yang Dingtian even sent 1,000 members of the Demon Dragon Legion to guard the periphery of Luofu City. Even at crucial moments, the great Grandmaster level expert Dongfang Minmi also came back to guard Cloud Sky City and Luofu City. The other great Grandmaster, Qin Wancho, was in charge of guarding Fire Island. After the meeting, Song Chunhua didn't stop at all. She directly flew towards Luofu City. Sect Master, do you still remember the Demon Fire Demon Phoenix egg that you gave me? Song Chunhua asked. Of course I remember, Yang Dingtian said. This is a demi-saint level demon beast that swallowed more than 10 Xian flames. Moreover, the demi-saint level of demon beasts and the demi-saint level of humans couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. This point was already clear enough. The total amount of Xian Qi possessed by a demi-saint level demon beast was more than 10 times that of a human demi-saint. Of course, the amount of energy released per unit of time might not be much higher. Therefore, Walingzi was a demi-saint. If he was allowed to go all out and kill, when his Xian Qi was exhausted, He could at most kill tens of thousands of people. However, the demon fire demon phoenix was enough to slaughter an entire city. It could turn the entire huge city into ruins and kill everyone. Recently, I seem to have heard some noise from it, Song Chunhua said. But it doesn't seem to have enough energy to hatch it. I was thinking, would it be better to put it in the magma? Yang Dingtian laughed. If we wait until it grows up, we will have an almost heaven-defying air force. Okay, Sect Master. I'm going back to Luofu City. I've already left for more than 4 hours, Song Chunhua said, and then directly flew away. Boom! At this moment, a fireball suddenly appeared in the distance. The entire ground was shaking. The entire Yin city was shaking. Countless tiles fell. Countless beasts ran away in fright. Countless birds flew away in fright. After a moment, a deafening loud noise was heard. This was an unprecedentedly huge explosion. Hundreds of miles away, they could feel the huge vibration and the loud noise. The fireball that exploded into the sky, and the mushroom cloud was actually bigger and more shocking than the atomic bomb explosion seen on TV. Suddenly, everyone present was horrified. Song Chunhua's face was pale. It's the direction of Luofu City, Song Chunhua hissed. Then, everyone present madly flew towards Luofu City. There were tens of millions of caddies of kerosene there, a full 5,000 tons. That was the lifeblood of the western region. More than 300 miles, half an hour, they had already flown. Then, everyone looked at the scene on the ground. They were completely shocked and their faces were pale. Is this the end of our Council of Light? Suddenly Song Xiao screamed. Song Chunhua stared blankly at the ground and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. The entire Luofu City had been completely turned into ruins. Not even a complete stone strip could be seen. Luofu City, which covered an area of hundreds of acres, had been completely turned into rubble and ruins. After the hard boulders exploded, they were directly burned to ashes. The entire Luofu City had become an incomparably huge pit. A few thousand meters around Luofu City, all the trees had been burned to charcoal. All the houses had been turned into ruins. The area within 1,000 meters looked as if it had been roasted by fire. The ruins of Luofu City had become a huge fire field. Everywhere was burning, and the black smoke that soared to the sky completely covered the sky. It was as if the entire Luofu City had become hell. On the ground, there were countless corpses of the demon dragon army. There were hundreds of them, all burned to charcoal. At the same time, there were hundreds of corpses of various types of winged cavalry. After the demon eagle army had retreated, the Council of Light immediately instigated hundreds of other winged cavalry to carry out aerial surveillance. Now the 10 million caddies of kerosene had been completely burned and turned into nothingness. There are at least 3 master-level powerhouses, Qin Wancho said decisively. Zhu Qingzhu had sent experts to destroy the 10 million caddies of kerosene. Previously, when there was the Demon Eagle army, they could guard against any movement within a radius of 5,000 miles. Therefore, it was very difficult for even master-level experts to enter, because they could not escape the surveillance of the Demon Eagle army. Once they entered, the West would immediately send master-level, and even great master-level experts to kill them. Therefore, in this 1 month, Zhu Qingzhu had lost many experts. Even if the enemy master-level experts discovered the Demon Eagle army, they could not do anything, because they could not fly as fast as the Demon Eagle army. And now, the Demon Eagle army had retreated from Fisher City. The aerial surveillance had been changed to ordinary winged cavalry, and the number had increased by nearly 10 times. Tens of thousands of winged cavalry were monitoring the sky for thousands of miles. However, the enemy master-level experts still broke through, and the Council of Light's winged cavalry did not report anything. This was because all the winged cavalry who saw the master-level invaders were killed. Their speed was too slow and could not escape the pursuit of the master-level experts. Qin Wancho was so angry that his whole body trembled. He suddenly rose into the air and chased towards the east. Song Xiao was also enraged as he followed closely behind. The two of them wanted to tear the sneak attacker into pieces. The defense of Luofu City was very tight. A master-level expert was stationed here for a long time, and another great master-level expert took turns to guard. Moreover, when Song Chunhua came to Yen City directly sent a master and 5 high-level revered martial artists to temporarily guard Luofu City. However, there was no such thing as guarding against a thief for 1,000 days. The departure of the Demon Eagle army directly left a huge hole in Yang Dingtian's aerial defense. Zhu Qingzhu's master-level invaders directly entered and destroyed tens of millions of kilograms of kerosene. Dongfang Minmi undoubtedly heard the loud noise, but he did not come over. This was because Cloud Sky City was more dangerous at this time, and he had to guard there. When he saw everyone's expressions of despair, it was not easy for them to think of a way to modify the crystal crossbows to throw kerosene bombs. Now all the kerosene bombs were destroyed. A few hundred winged cavalry warriors, a few hundred demon dragon warriors, 1 master and 5 revered martial artists had died. Yang Dingtian was also heartbroken. Yang Dingtian looked at everyone and said, "This is a huge blow to us, but this does not prevent us from winning. In the Sunset Mountains, there is still a batch of kerosene bombs. Use the fastest speed to transport them all to Yin City. In addition, use all your strength to extract kerosene. Get as many kerosene bombs as you can." In the end, Yang Dingtian said, "From this, it can be seen that Zhu Qingzhu is doing everything possible to destroy our kerosene. This proves that he is very afraid of our kerosene tactics." Song Chunhua looked at the burning Luofu City and said sorrowfully, "But the war has already broken out. Even if we do our best, we won't be able to get much kerosene. Moreover, the most important thing is, the egg of the demon fire demon phoenix that you gave me is still in Luofu City." "What?" Yang Dingtian cried out in alarm. The egg of the demon fire demon phoenix was inside. With such a violent explosion, the egg would have long been smashed to pieces. "I want to go take a look." Suddenly, Song Chunhua rushed into the raging flames. This was a gift from Yang Dingtian, and she cherished it very much. At this moment, suddenly, there was a shocking cry. Then, a huge demon fire demon phoenix flew into the raging flames. Chapter 547. Wherever this phoenix passed, all the flames were extinguished. All the flames formed a part of its body. Suddenly, everyone present was completely shocked. Yang Dingtian and Song Chunhua were also completely stunned. Was this a blessing in disguise? Zhu Qingzhu sent a master-level powerhouse to sneak attack Luofu City and destroyed millions of kilograms of kerosene. If it weren't for the ancient giant beast Xiao Xiao, it would be tantamount to destroying the only hope of victory in the West. However, this raging flame, the shocking flame energy, not only did not destroy the demon phoenix egg, it directly hatched. Then, Yang Dingtian was shocked to see that this demon fire demon phoenix, just hatched, was already dozens of meters in size. Moreover, because there were flames everywhere, so after it flew over, it swallowed the flames, getting bigger and bigger. In the end, all the flames in the entire Luofu City were swallowed up. And this demon fire demon phoenix was hundreds of meters in size. Ayo! It let out a long cry. The demon fire demon phoenix baby suddenly flew toward Song Chunhua. Yang Dingtian was shocked. Such a huge demon fire demon phoenix rushing over. Who could withstand it? Who knew? This demon phoenix flew in the air, getting smaller and smaller. Finally, when it landed on Song Chunhua's shoulder, it was only the size of a palm. Then it pouted its small sharp mouth and kissed Song Chunhua's face. This demon phoenix was too heaven-defying. Yang Dingtian was really worried that this little demon phoenix's kiss would burn a hole in Song Chunhua's face. Who knew that after this demon phoenix's small sharp mouth kissed, Song Chunhua's face was still as smooth as jade, without any damage. Yang Dingtian couldn't help but reach out to touch this little thing. It was only warm to the touch. Everyone present looked at this gorgeous and cute little fire phoenix in amazement. Yang Dingtian reached out to touch it, but this time the little guy did not want to. It turned its small body, and suddenly spat out a ball of flame. Boom! The little guy's body was only the size of a palm, but the flame it spat out was dozens of feet. And the temperature was surprisingly high. Yang Dingtian fortunately dodged quickly, otherwise he would have been burned. "Don't do that," Song Chunhua said sternly. But how could the little fellow understand? It thought that Song Chunhua was being intimate with it, so it flew to her face and rubbed against her. This little guy's parents were semi-sage level devil fire demonic phoenix. They had swallowed a lot of phoenix heavenly fire. Therefore, this little guy was born with the energy of phoenix heavenly fire. Song Chunhua, on the other hand, had just swallowed the heavenly phoenix fire. Therefore, the moment the little fellow was born, it smelled Song Chunhua's energy aura and immediately treated her as its mother. The tragedy of the destruction of Luofu City and the destruction of millions of kilograms of kerosene had been somewhat diluted by the birth of this little fellow. The birth of such a powerful creature, as the phoenix's nirvana, required very special conditions and costs. However, the price of this little fellow's birth was too tragic. When the Devil Dragon Army in the Sunset Mountains and the citizens of Cloud Sky City heard that Luofu City's kerosene had been destroyed, they immediately went crazy. After that, he did not sleep or rest at all. He crazily cut wood and crazily extracted oil. Especially the warriors of the Devil Dragon Army. When they heard that hundreds of their brothers had been burned to death, they immediately gritted their teeth. After that, a few thousand people did not rest at all. They rode the Devil Dragon and continuously transported kerosene to Iron Furnace City, gathering civilian ships, gathering troops, modifying crystal crossbows and launching submarines. Yang Dingtian could not manage these matters. He had specialized people to manage them. Therefore, Yang Dingtian simply let go of everything. He spent the remaining few days in the Sunset Mountains, cutting wood and extracting kerosene with the hundreds of thousands of people. Under the frantic efforts of the hundreds of thousands of people, the kerosene production had actually increased by 2 times. Within a day, they had actually extracted millions of kilograms of kerosene. Suppressing the kerosene was extremely simple. It was just a huge turntable that squeezed the kerosene wood and blasted the kerosene out. And this huge roulette wheel was directly rotated by the demonic dragon and the warriors with powerful cultivation. Yang Dingtian and a few high-level warriors were currently turning the huge turntable with all their might. They watched as the transparent kerosene slid into the barrels. Sect Master, are you really not bringing us to this naval battle? Lu Hengxi asked. The Devil Dragon Army is not suited for naval battles, Yang Dingtian said. That brat Kuei Ning really left? Lu Hengxi said angrily. Don't blame him. I was the one who told him to leave. He directly held his sword to his neck and refused to leave. Yang Dingtian said. If he didn't leave, the Vulture Sect's Black Vulture Army would have joined the battle. At that time, the situation would have become even more complicated. We are currently unable to touch the Vulture Sect. One day, I will bring the Devil Dragon Army and charge into that bullshit Vulture Sect. I will burn all those harmful black vultures to death and burn that bullshit Vulture Sect to the ground, Lu Hengxi said angrily. He then asked, Sect Master, can we really win? What? Even a daredevil like you is not confident? Yang Dingtian laughed. After all, it is the sea. Our Devil Dragon Army does not fear anyone on land, but on the sea, we are not confident. Lu Hengxi said. Moreover, I also heard a lot of gossip. There were ordinary people, low-level warriors, and some nobles. They said that as long as you are annihilated on the sea, they will immediately prepare a flag, form an army, and prepare to welcome the army of Zhengzhou. After saying this, Lu Hengxi said angrily, Now I know that there are many bad people among the ordinary people. We are risking our lives for them, but they are cursing us to die. If the people of the entire western region were like Cloud Heaven City, how good would that be? Yang Dingtian sighed. How could he win the hearts of the poor people? It couldn't be simpler. In the Earth era, there were already textbook examples. Give them freedom, give them land, and there would be countless people who would die for you. The example of Cloud Heaven City was very clear. In just a few months, millions of people built a 100-mile city wall for Yang Dingtian. They built a brand new and huge Cloud Heaven City. After that, Yang Dingtian moved hundreds of thousands of people to Yin City to build a defensive line. They still had no complaints and worked crazily day and night without rest. They didn't feel like they were working. It was as if these defensive lines were built for themselves. Of course, these defensive lines were indeed built for themselves. Once Zhongzhou occupied the western region, their freedom, land, and dignity would be completely gone. Moreover, when the people of Yin City slandered Yang Dingtian, they directly rushed out and fought with their lives. However, Yang Dingtian could only use this method in Cloud Heaven City, and not in other places. Because Cloud Heaven City was his absolute territory, all the nobles had been killed by him. The Divine Weapons Manor and the Northwest Qin City both had owners. Yang Dingtian had the right to mobilize their armies and resources, but he had no right to interfere with their internal affairs. Therefore, the people of Yin City were slandering and cursing Yang Dingtian, while countless serfs continued to watch numbly. 3 days later, in the crazy work in the Sunset Mountains, 3,500,000 caddies of kerosene were squeezed out and made into 80,000 barrels of kerosene. As for the Northwest Qin City and the Divine Weapons Manor, they collected all the ships in the Northwest continent. They collected thousands of ships that could go out to sea. However, these ships weren't powered by crystals and only had sails. Moreover, they were of different sizes and had poor defense. It was impossible to use them for battle. The only use of these ships was to rescue people after the battle. Many people felt that Yang Dingtian was crazy. The war hadn't even started, and there was no hope of winning. But he was already preparing to rescue the captives. In the afternoon 3 days later, the Western Army began to board the ships. 200 warships carried 2,500 large crystal crossbows and 80,000 barrels of kerosene. Nearly 100 crystal ships were loaded with more than 1,000 medium-sized cannons and 100,000 shells. There were also 500 crystal ships of various types, loaded with various materials, and 100,000 soldiers. That's right, Zhongzhou had a total of 8 million soldiers, while the western region had only mobilized 100,000. The remaining 20 to 30,000 people were all operating the crystal crossbows or cannons. Along with them, there were 10,000 elite winged cavalry warriors. Of course, it wasn't that he didn't want to send out more winged cavalry warriors. It was because these winged cavalry warriors could only travel 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers before stopping to rest. Yang Dingtian didn't have that many ships for them to dock. After boarding the ships for an entire day and night, all the crystal crossbows, all the cannons, all the kerosene barrels, all the cannons, all the materials, all the fresh water, and all the soldiers had all boarded the ships. On the morning of the 4th day, the swearing ceremony was held on the surface of the sea. Although it was only 1/10 of Zhongzhou's fleet, it was still a magnificent sight to see nearly 1,000 ships of various types spread out on the surface of the sea. The thousands of ships were lined up in an arrow shape. Yang Dingtian's flagship was at the tip of the arrow in the middle. More than 10,000 people stood on the plaza of the dock. Among them, there were the representatives of the people of Yin City and the feudal lords of the entire western region. All of them came to the dock for a parade. The atmosphere might be solemn, but it might also be cold. Only the few hundred representatives from Cloud Sky City were enthusiastic and hot-blooded. The rest of the people looked at Yang Dingtian's beggar fleet with cold and hostile gazes. Just as Lu Hangxi said, Yang Dingtian had killed Zhu Hongli and forced the feudal lords to pledge their allegiance, directly suppressing the rebellion of the western region. However, it was only temporarily suppressed. This group of people's fear of Zhongzhou's army and their dissatisfaction with Yang Dingtian continued to fester. Therefore, when facing the swearing ceremony, these people were supposed to be excited and enthusiastic, as if they were attending a funeral. There were even many people with ulterior motives who wore black and white on the ships. It was as if they were sending Yang Dingtian to his funeral. Yang Dingtian's ruthlessness made them not dare to resist on the surface. However, they still displayed the cold violence and resistance to the extreme. For this expedition, Yang Dingtian had taken 100,000 people with him. They were the most elite and most loyal warriors in the western region. Almost all the experts of the Council of Light had been taken away, leaving behind Song Shao and Qin Huayu to guard the western region and continue to prepare for war. Of course, after Yang Dingtian took away the army, would the feudal lords in the western region fall into chaos and rebel? It could only be said that if they wanted to die, they could rebel. Now in the western region, there were thousands of demon dragon warriors, the most elite troops of the northwest Qin city, and tens of thousands of flying cavalry troops. All of them controlled the key points of the western region. Song Xiao was even more stubborn than Yang Dingtian. When he decided to side with the Council of Light, he raised his butcher's knife and killed until rivers of blood flowed. Once there was a rebellion in the western region, he could kill all of the feudal lords with his imperial sword in hand. As the highest commander left behind, Song Xiao presided over the swearing ceremony. After paying respects to the two suns and moons, as well as the ancestors of the primal chaos continent and the Tiando League, Song Xiao gave a speech. In the sound of the drums, Song Xiao's speech was fervent and intense, making people's blood boil. At the most intense part of his speech, Song Xiao roared. The army below crazily slammed their swords against their armor and roared loudly. The feudal lords and citizens who were watching the ceremony should be cheering and clapping loudly. However, they were expressionless and indifferent to everything. They did not have any reaction. As for the citizens of Cloud Sky City who were watching the ceremony, they shouted until they were hoarse, and their throats were hoarse. As for the feudal lords and citizens of Yan City, they looked at them with disdain, as if they were watching a monkey show. Every one of you is a pitiful worm who has been brainwashed by Yang Dingtian. Serves you right to work like pigs and dogs all day long. Lowly people will always be lowly people. Yang Dingtian will not return this time. This group of idiots, the higher they jump, the faster they die. See God bless us. See God bless us. Set off a giant wave that will devour Yang Dingtian and his lackeys. Let this group of people die without a burial ground. Emperor's army of Zhongzhou, hurry up and come to the western region. Kill this clown Yang Dingtian, and return our peaceful life to the western region. After Song Xiao's speech, it was Yang Dingtian's turn to make the final speech. Yang Dingtian stood on the high platform, under the many memorial tablets, and stood in the midst of the smoke and fire. He coldly looked at the tens of thousands of people who were watching the ceremony and suddenly said, "Brothers of Cloud Sky City, step back and stand to the side. Don't stand with this group of people. It's an eyesore." All of a sudden, everyone was shocked. In such a grand and solemn occasion, Yang Dingtian was also going to jump up and down? After hearing Yang Dingtian's words, the representatives of Cloud Sky City, who came to watch the ceremony, immediately left the crowd and stood to the side. Instantly, they were separated from the rest of the crowd. Although the citizens of Cloud Sky City were poor, they wore the best clothes they had and tied up with red ribbons to celebrate the occasion. As for the remaining feudal lords and citizens, they were all dressed in black and white. Some even had evil intentions and directly wore white hats, looking like mourning hats. "You're all dressed like this. Are you here to attend the funeral?" Yang Dingtian slowly asked. Suddenly, everyone trembled and took half a step back slightly. The reason why they did this was because of the silent violence, and because they felt that the law could not punish the majority. They didn't expect Yang Dingtian to directly point it out. This person's knife had killed millions of people. If he started a massacre here, they would die of injustice. Suddenly, they trembled and secretly wanted to take off the mourning hat on their heads. When some people were vicious, no one could compare to them. However, when they were timid, no one could compare to them. "Don't take it off. Just wear it like this," Yang Dingtian slowly said. "Today I won't start a massacre. However, in the following days, I have a word of advice for you. If you don't seek death, you won't die." When these words came out, everyone's expression changed. Yang Dingtian didn't leave any face for them. "I'll leave behind President Song Xiao, young Master Qin Huayu, and young Master Chou Yiming. These three people have the most loyal and elite troops in their hands. There are more than 1 million of them. I can say that if your 2 million motley crew wants to rebel, the three of them, in less than 5 days, will be enough to kill all of you." Yang Dingtian said coldly. Then he suddenly shouted, "Song Xiao, Qin Huayu, Chou Yiming, where are you? Your subordinates are here." Immediately the three people stepped out and bowed. Yang Dingtian pulled out a golden sword and handed it to Song Xiao. He said, "This command sword is for the three of you. After I go to war, the entire western region will be handed over to the three of you. If there is any rebellion, any internal strife, no matter the reason, kill them all. If there is any army that rebels, the feudal lords will be punished. Kill as many people as you rebel. There is no upper limit to the number of people killed. As long as there is a rebellion, there will be no end to it. Yes. Song Xiao took over the golden sword with a ferocious look in his eyes. He looked at the warlords below and said, "Everyone, the sword in my hand is already thirsty for blood. Why don't you all rebel immediately after the clan master leaves for battle? Let my sword taste your blood." When these words came out, the people below trembled and lowered their heads. They kept telling themselves in their hearts, they won't be arrogant for long. After young Dingtian dies in the sea, the day the Central State Army arrives will be the day they die. Endure, endure. Wait for young Dingtian and the other traitors to be buried in the fish's belly. Wait for Zhu Qing to lead the army and kill them all. Young Dingtian looked at them, lowering their heads to hide their vicious and venomous gazes. He smiled faintly and said, "I advise all of you, if you want to rebel, you have to wait until the news of my death is confirmed. Don't be like last time, being tricked by others and jumping out so early. Also in your hearts, you must think that I will not return this time, and will definitely be annihilated. Then I advise all of you to think of another possibility. Otherwise, if the Central State Army is annihilated and I return victorious, you will not be prepared at all. At that time, it will be even more painful." Everyone lowered their heads even more, but their hearts were filled with disdain. "Yang Dingtian, water must have entered your head. The Central State Fleet is 100 times stronger than you. You are dead for sure, and you still want to win? You must be dreaming." Even those who stood on Yang Dingtian's side were not optimistic about this naval battle, let alone this group of people who longed for the Central State Army. In their hearts, Yang Dingtian was already a dead man. This was just a struggle before death. Yang Dingtian and them no longer had anything to say. He waved his hand and said, "All right, let's not talk too much, let's go." Immediately, Yang Dingtian and the rest rode on the winged cavalry and flew toward the fleet on the sea. After a while, Yang Dingtian led the many experts and landed on the flagship. "Let's go." Then he waved the flag fiercely. Immediately, nearly 1,000 ships of various types and more than 500 simple submarines floated on the sea. They formed an arrow shape and majestically advanced toward the east. Chapter 548. Today was undoubtedly the most glorious day of Zhu Qingzhu's life. It was his pinnacle moment. 8 million soldiers from Middle State were in his hands. Zhu Qingzhu had experienced too much. Ordinary things could hardly cause waves to surge in his heart. What was the most glorious moment of his life? Without a doubt, it was when he defeated all his opponents and became the sect master of Black Heaven sect. However, compared to today, the glory of ascending to the position of sect master seemed too small. Although Black Heaven sect's immortal mountain was tall, and its horizons were broad, how could it compare to the vast and boundless ocean? Black Heaven sect was one of the 3 great sects in the world, and was incomparably respected. However, it was only an island after all. How could it compare to controlling 100,000 miles of Middle State? At this moment, Zhu Qingzhu did not hate Yang Dingtian at all, even though he killed his son, Zhu Hongli. However, his son? Zhu Qingzhu had plenty. He was even grateful for Yang Dingtian's childishness and stupidity. Previously, he was already heartbroken when Qin Chichi and Ning Wuming attacked Cloud Sky City and tainted Middle State. Who was Ning Wuming? He was just an illegitimate son, and a lackey of the evil demon Prince Li Ming. What right did he have to control the western region? Who was Qin Chichi? She was just a spy and a servant. What right did she have to dominate the world? Therefore, although Zhu Qingzhu treated Ning Wuming and Qin Chichi with respect, he was extremely disdainful in his heart. In his heart, even though Yang Dingtian came from a humble background, he was much more noble than people like Qin Chichi and Ning Wuming. No matter what, Yang Dingtian was a legitimate son. He was the only direct disciple of Dongfang Minmi, and the only successor of Shimin Wuya. What kind of dog was Qin Chichi? To put it nicely, she was an adopted daughter. To put it bluntly, she was just a lowly servant. What was Ning Wuming? You were just an illegitimate son, and a lackey who killed your brother and sister-in-law. What right did you have to be on equal footing with me? Therefore, not only did Zhu Qingzhu not hate Yang Dingtian, he even wanted to give him a huge signboard with the words, "Thank you for your stupidity." He wanted to thank Yang Dingtian. If it wasn't for Yang Dingtian, how would he be able to interfere with the Western region? How would he be able to control the entire 30,000 miles of Western region? Young people, childish and stupid, are the most adorable. If Yang Dingtian wasn't so stupid, how could he step on Yang Dingtian's head to reach the peak of the universe? In fact, Yang Dingtian had not only helped Zhu Qingzhu in the Western region, but also in the Central region. Zhu Qingzhu had always been like an emperor in Zhongzhou. However, he was an expert of the universe after all. He had to pay attention to his table manners. Therefore, even though their statuses were supreme, they were still very weak. However, to say that the hundreds of forces in the central state would listen to him, that was not necessarily the case. The Sky Cloud Pavilion and the earth-shattering city were two huge thorns. Even the dozens of great forces in the 3 continents of the Central Plains were secretly opposed to Zhu Qingzhu. Normally, they would be so respectful to you that they would even kneel down and lick your shoes. However, if they wanted to send troops, they would have to fork out money and strength. All of them agreed on the surface but disobeyed in secret. If Yang Dingtian hadn't set up the Tiando League Central Committee and violated the greatest taboo, Zhu Qingzhu wouldn't have been able to do anything. He wouldn't have been able to control all the forces in the central region. Yang Dingtian had split up the Tiando League. Whoever didn't send troops would be guilty of the same crime. Then, don't blame me for taking the opportunity to cleanse them. Therefore, Zhu Qingzhu had a butcher's knife in his left hand and righteousness in his right. All the forces in the central region would obediently give their all to suppress the western region. Therefore, not only did Yang Dingtian allow Zhu Qingzhu to obtain the western region, but he also allowed him to completely control the central region. As such, how could Zhu Qingzhu not be grateful to Yang Dingtian? How could he not love him? However, the more he hated him, the more vicious he was. This battle hadn't started yet, but the fruits of victory had already been distributed. Yang Dingtian crippled his martial arts, crippled his sea of qi, and chopped off his limbs. Then, he paraded around the world, from the western region to the central region, and then to the east region. Among Yang Dingtian's women, Shimen Yinyan couldn't be touched, and had to be given to Li Ming. Qin Jiaojiao and Qin Mengli had to be given to Ning Wuming. This was because Yang Dingtian had stolen Wumaji. Ning Wuming wanted to return the favor tenfold. Unfortunately, Yang Dingtian didn't have 10 women. As for Zhu Qingzhu, in this world, there were 2 women that he coveted. One was Dongfang Minmi's wife, and the other was Shimen Wuya's wife. He, Zhu Qingzhu, was old and didn't have much interest in young ladies. What he loved the most were those loyal, noble, and beautiful women who had been married before. How could a young man understand the taste of a dignified lady? Everyone said that Yang Dingtian and Madame Shimen had an affair, but Zhu Qingzhu didn't believe it. When he visited Cloud Heaven City, Zhu Qingzhu's shrewd eyes could tell that there was nothing going on between Madame Shimen and Yang Dingtian. That was good. He, Zhu Qingzhu, wasn't interested in making Yang Dingtian a cuckold, but he was very interested in making Shimen Wuya a cuckold. Yang Dingtian was, after all, a junior. If you were to make a cuckold out of him, it would mean that you were disrespectful to your elders. It would mean that you were throwing away your status. Unfortunately, he couldn't touch Dongfang Minmi's wife, because he still had a daughter that he couldn't offend. What a pity, what a pity. Yang Dingtian, why are you doing this? You're young, but you're already a master. There are no more than 10 beautiful women in the world, and you occupy more than half of them. The remaining half are also by your side. Instead of living such a good life, you chose the hardest and stupidest path. You're afraid that you'll suffer a fate worse than death and ruin your reputation, causing your women to be humiliated every day. Zhu Qingzhu gently sat on the golden armrest of the throne, shook his head and sighed. Foolish, foolish. Then he thought of another fool, his son Zhu Hongxue. Sigh, foolish as well. Zhu Qingzhu sighed silently. His heart ached for his son, but he was also proud of him. I'll just pretend that I've never had this son. For the sake of the great cause, it's worth it even if I don't have 2 or 3 sons. Faction leader, the army has been assembled. You're about to make the oath. Outside, someone said in a low voice. The 8 million soldiers of Zhongzhou and more than 10,000 ships took a few days and nights to move from land to sea. More than 10,000 ships spread out on the sea, spanning hundreds of miles. The densely packed fleet looked like it was going to cut off the entire sea. Everyone was on the sea, including the 100,000 airmen. They were obediently crouching on the ships. Zhu Qingzhu was the only one floating high in the sky. Looking at the endless fleet, Zhu Qingzhu's heart was filled with emotions. This was an unprecedented cause. The millions of soldiers of Zhongzhou came out in full force. Such a huge scene had not been seen for hundreds of years. This was a force that could destroy the world. This was a force that could tear the entire western region apart. The masters of all the forces in Zhongzhou, and even the masters of all the forces in Dongzhou, were all under his feet. Even Yang Dingtian's sect, the Yinyang school, had sent an envoy to the port to make the oath. All the members of the Tiando League were under his feet. Even the most arrogant Cloud Sky Pavilion was frightened by his monstrous power. Yin Kalen had personally come. The even more arrogant earth-splitting city had sent their great elder to kneel on the ground and make the oath. Of course, this was to ensure the integrity of the Tiando League's headquarters. Even the western region had representatives to participate in the oath. The Northwest Qin city's representative in Zhongzhou was originally Qin Wanchou's younger brother, who had been chased out of the western region by Qin Wanchou. Coincidentally, Zhu Qingzhu had helped him up and made him the new master of Northwest Qin City. This Northwest Qin City could only be considered as a force in exile. Not only Northwest Qin City, but also world society, and even Cloud Sky City, had people participating in the oath to suppress Yang Dingtian. Then who was this exiled Cloud Sky City master? He was Shiman Wuya's adopted son, the former internal affairs supervisor of Cloud Sky City, Shiman Zhu. This time, the exiled Cloud Sky City had also sent out thousands of soldiers to suppress the western region. Therefore, Zhu Qingzhu could be said to be the hero of the world. All the heroes of the world had fallen into his trap. Compared to Yang Dingtian, the oath ceremony in Zhongzhou was more than 10 times bigger. More than 100,000 people had gathered at the plaza by the sea. All the forces of the Tiando League were present. All the feudal lords of Zhongzhou were present. Everyone present was looking at Zhu Qingzhu with the determination to win. In this monstrous battle, everyone had chosen to stand on a side. Other than the western region, everyone stood on Zhu Qingzhu's side without any hesitation. Because even a fool could see that Yang Dingtian didn't have any hope of winning. The higher Yang Dingtian jumped, the more miserable his death would be. Zhu Qingzhu had chosen the Cloud Sky Pavilion's master, Yin Kalen, as the representative to read the oath. Yin Kalen was here because of Wu Yoming's attitude. Wu Yoming had asked the Cloud Sky Pavilion to work hard to integrate into Zhongzhou. Only then would they be safe and have enough power. However, Yin Kalen did not expect that he would be the one to read the oath. He was very unwilling, but he did not dare to reject in front of everyone. After praying to the 2 suns and moons, to the chaotic mainland, and to the Tiando League's ancestors, Yin Kalen stood on the high platform. Amidst the smoke, he slowly read the oath. Yang Dingtian, the traitor, has committed too many crimes to be recorded. His first crime was to impersonate the successor of the Yinyang school's master. His second crime was to usurp the Cloud Sky City master's position, eliminate his enemies, and kill the Yangs. His third crime was to humiliate and murder the successor of the Yinyang school, Dongfang Bingling. His fourth crime was to slaughter the entire Yi family in White Cloud City. The pitiful Yi family, the gate of justice, the leader of the righteous faction, and the heroes of generations, was destroyed by the traitor Yang Dingtian. His fifth crime was to molest Madame Shiman and commit sexual misconduct. His 99th crime was to split the Tiando League and start a war. His crimes were extremely heinous. Such an evil traitor was hated by the heavens and hated by the earth. the 2 suns and moons, and the sky was filled with lightning. They wanted nothing more than to tear him to pieces. When his parents learned of his crimes, they wanted nothing more than to cut him into pieces on the day he was born. They wanted to destroy him, so that he could be reborn. Now the evil traitor Yang Dingtian had enslaved the western region. The billions of innocent people in the western region were living a life worse than death. They were looking to the east and waiting for the Zhongzhou Imperial Army, as if they were looking at their parents. Yang Dingtian's crimes were extremely heinous. Yang Dingtian's crimes were monstrous. Today, sect leader Zhu led the Imperial Army into the bitter land to save the billions of lives. He was enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. The evil traitor Yang Dingtian, a clown, will die without a burial place. The entire document had a few thousand words, and Yun Kalin took a full hour to read it. He listed the 99 crimes of Yang Dingtian, making him the most despicable, shameless, lecherous, greedy, vicious, and hypocritical person in the ancient world. It could be said that there was no one like him in history. Yang Dingtian would let Qiu Wenjie kill Zhu Hongli as proof of his allegiance. Zhu Qingzhu would also let Yun Kalin read the crusade as proof of his allegiance. If Yang Dingtian were to hear this accusation, he would definitely gasp in amazement. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, the 18 vassals didn't have as many crimes as Yang Dingtian did. This crusade couldn't be compared to the ones in ancient China. But in the chaotic world, it was the #1 crusade. In the end, Zhu Qingzhu didn't walk to the high platform. Instead, he floated in the air and said slowly, "My imperial army is 10 times more powerful than that traitor Yang Dingtian. The people in the West look up to the imperial army. As the saying goes, the right time, the right place, and the right people are in my hands. Yang Dingtian's traitors are like chickens and dogs in my hands, unable to withstand a single blow. I give the order that within 3 months, I will conquer the West and return victorious. During the new year, I will bring that traitor Yang Dingtian to Zhongzhou and parade him through the streets to celebrate the new year." This was the peak of Zhu Qingzhu's life. This was the proudest moment of his life, just like Cao Cao before the Battle of Red Cliff. However, Zhu Qingzhu's literary skills couldn't be compared to Cao Cao's, so he couldn't write a poem. The two of them were impassioned and had the same feeling of looking down on the world. Furthermore, Zhu Qingzhu's power was more than 10 times that of Cao Cao's. However, Cao Cao left behind a song that was passed down through the ages. As for Zhu Qingzhu, he only wanted to say, "Yang Dingtian, I'm here to fuck your mother-in-law. Let's go." Zhu Qingzhu gave the order. More than 10,000 spaceships, majestic and boundless, swallowed the world and headed towards the west. 2 armies. One had more than 100,000 people. The other had more than 8 million people. One had a few hundred warships. The other had more than 10,000 warships. However, both sides didn't avoid each other. They didn't play hide and seek on the ocean. They just followed the most direct route. If one looked down from the sky, they would be able to see it. The 2 armies were almost in a straight line. Every day they were getting closer, closer and closer. 13,000 miles. 10,000 miles. 8,000 miles. 5,000 miles. 3,000 miles. 1,000 miles. 10 days and 10 nights later, the 2 armies met for the first time. Yang Dingtian's originally majestic navy suddenly became as weak as an ant. Looking down from the sky, Zhongzhou's navy covered the sky, as if it could engulf the entire West. Not to mention the navy of the West. It was like a small insect facing a giant beast. Yang Dingtian floated in the sky and looked at the unprecedented scene in front of him. He looked at the unprecedentedly huge fleet. Yang Dingtian didn't hide or fear. He ordered charge. Subsequently, Yang Dingtian's extremely weak fleet, which was less than a dozen times stronger, rushed over. It was like Mars hitting Earth. Chapter 549. Dive. Following Yang Dingtian's order, all the submarines immediately dove. They moved at full speed towards the Zhongzhou army. Full speed ahead. At the same time, the 200 large warships and close to 100 fast cannons advanced at full speed. Like a sharp sword, they rushed towards the Zhongzhou fleet. The Zhengzhou fleet began to set up a pocket formation. The Central Army did not move, while the left and right flanks surrounded the Zhengzhou fleet. Yang Dingtian and Qin Wanchou were playing Go at this time. Of course, it was not Yang Dingtian who was pretending. It was Qin Wanchou who insisted on dragging Yang Dingtian to play Go. Naturally, Yang Dingtian wasn't as calm as Zhuge Liang. The game of Go was a complete mess. Sect Master has a trump card. Why are you still upset? Qin Wanchou laughed. From the beginning to the end, the one who was most confident in this naval battle was not Yang Dingtian, but Qin Wanchou, because he had seen Naga. That earth-shattering aura had left a deep impression on him. At this time, Dongfang Minmi was sitting quietly on the side, while Shuang was still in Yang Dingtian's spatial ring. On the other hand, Xiao was covered in a black cloak, trembling slightly. Of course, she was not afraid but excited. She was ready to make a move. Martial Uncle Qin, I don't plan to use Shuang in this battle. Yang Dingtian said. We are still too weak. We cannot reveal Shuang's identity. Qin Wanchou's expression changed. Then what should we do about this naval battle? Without Naga, we will lose without a doubt. Don't worry, Martial Uncle, Yang Dingtian said. We don't need the Queen of Naga for this naval battle. I have confidence in winning. Qin Wanchou said. Then I will wait and see. Don't worry, Yang Dingtian said. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We can use it to test our fire oil tactics, especially the submarine tactics and the cannons. This is our future. We cannot rely on the strength of others every time. Makes sense, Qin Wanchou said. At this moment, the two fleets of the central continent quickly moved to the two sides, wanting to completely surround the Western fleet. Once they were surrounded, the situation would be dire. Qiu Wanjia, who had the most experience in naval warfare, immediately ordered the submarines to cut off the two wings of the central continent fleet. Yes, Song Chunhua replied loudly. Then, he ordered several hundred huge energy clocks to be placed in the sea. Then he ordered the experts of martial mystic realm and above to inject their profound qi and strike the clocks with all their might, using a special rhythm and a special number to strike. This kind of huge energy clock could transmit sound very far in the water, and it could transmit a specific password. Even within 100 miles, submarines at the bottom of the sea would be able to hear this special code. Not only that, but each submarine also had a special resonator that could directly record the command password. The wisdom of man is limitless. What was the most difficult thing about submarine warfare? It was an underwater command. Once the submarine entered the water, there would be no radio, and they would not be able to cooperate at all. Therefore, someone came up with the idea of an underwater energy clock in Yang Dingtian's resonator. This way, the problem of underwater command was solved. They just needed to fabricate a specific password. Of course, this kind of clocks could be heard by both themselves and the enemy. Therefore, the password must not be leaked. What was this password? The telegrams on Earth used the Morse code, but Yang Dingtian had heard of it before, but he did not understand it at all. Therefore, he had no choice but to get someone to write a new password, using special numbers and rhythm to express certain words. In short, this password could not be compared to the Morse code. It was much more bloated and messy, but it was not a problem to use it. It just needed to send out a command, and it would take a little longer. After hearing the command, the submarine fleet split into two and hid in the deep water, rushing towards the two wings of the enemy. The speed of the central continent's crystal ships was very fast. They could reach 100 miles in an hour. Therefore, the outflanking movement was also very fast. But the submarine fleet in the west was even faster. That's right, in the Earth era, the earliest submarines were stepped on. Even in the 19th century, the distance of submarines was frighteningly short. Moreover, their speed was very slow. Therefore, they basically did not have any combat value. And in the primal chaos world, with the power of crystals, the biggest bottleneck was directly solved. Therefore, although Yang Dingtian's submarine fleet was extremely simple and crude, it was almost like a water silo and an iron can. But the speed of sailing was quite fast. In just half an hour, The submarine fleet in the west had already blocked the front of the two wings of the Central Continent fleet. They were only 20 miles away. The observer flying in the air saw the buoy released by the submarine and immediately knew the position of the submarine. Then, he immediately sent out the position of the enemy fleet with an energy clock code signal. It was really pitiful. The submarine fleet could not see the enemy at all. If it was the modern submarine fleet on Earth, they could detect the enemy's warships through this method. However, Yang Dingtian's fleet was completely in the dark. They had to rely on the ground to give them instructions. After receiving the instructions from the ground, the submarine fleet immediately changed their direction and continued to move forward. Soon, they were within a dozen miles of the enemy fleet. This place was almost an attack position. At this time, the submarine fleet floated slightly. The observer in the submarine drilled out of the transparent crystal cover and could already see the shadow of the enemy fleet. Then he immediately released the buoy. I have already entered attack position and can attack at any time. Please give the order. Xiao Wanjie shouted from outside. Sect leader, we can already attack. Should we attack? Attack. Yang Dingtian directly gave the order. As for how to attack, Yang Dingtian did not know. Xiao Wanjie's navy team commanded, but the order to attack must be given by Yang Dingtian. Yes, Xiao Wanjie said. Then he immediately gave the order. The energy clock immediately gave the order. No more. Yang Dingtian threw away the chess piece and said, "This is the first submarine battle in the history of this world. It is also the biggest naval battle in the history of this world. Let's go and watch." Then, Yang Dingtian and Dongfang Minmi left the cabin and came to the deck. Inside the submarine, after receiving the order from the energy clock, they were already closer to the two wings of the enemy fleet. Attack. The captain of each submarine immediately gave the order. Then, each submarine floated up a little more. Then, they began to use special underwater telescopic tools to determine the position of the enemy fleet. Finally, they adjusted the position of the torpedo launcher. That's right, the torpedo launcher in the Primal Chaos continent was very simple. It was like a gun, directly using the telescopic tool to aim at the position of the enemy fleet underwater. Then through special calculations, they adjusted the angle of attack. Fire. The captain gave the order. Immediately, the torpedo fighter activated the crystal power of the torpedo. So. Instantly, for torpedoes in each submarine, like a black fish, rushed towards the huge enemy fleet. If it was in the modern battlefield, such torpedoes would have been detected long ago. But in the Primal Chaos continent, it could be considered as completely silent. Moreover, the speed of these torpedoes was almost fixed at 80 miles per hour. This speed, of course, was not considered fast in the modern world. In the 21st century, the fastest torpedo's speed was already around 200 knots. But 80 miles per hour was already very shocking. This was to ensure the accuracy and to suppress the speed. Otherwise, it would not be a problem to double the speed. So. The two submarine fleets had a total of 300 ships, a total of more than 1,000 torpedoes. Like a fish, they rushed forward rapidly. The densely packed torpedoes were getting closer and closer to the enemy fleet. 10 miles, 8 miles, 6 miles, 5 miles, 3 miles, 2 miles. Soon, the water ghosts of the Zhongzhou fleet immediately discovered the torpedoes. Underwater attack, underwater attack. Then, they activated the crystal crossbows under the bottom of the ship and shot fiercely. After receiving the information about Yang Dingtian's submarine and torpedoes, Zhu Qingzhu did not pay much attention to it. Of course, it was because Yang Dingtian regarded the submarine tactic as his trump card. So he used all means to defend against it. In the end, the method adopted was to install more than 10 crystal crossbows under each warship, and then dozens of water ghosts under the ship. Once they discovered the torpedoes, they would immediately shoot crystal arrows to destroy it. Although he said he did not pay much attention to it, it was because he knew the submarine tactic and the kerosene tactic. But after all, the ghost bird was not a human, and the information it passed was relatively vague. Moreover, there was no submarine tactic in this world, so Zhu Qingzhu did not think it was very useful. Later, Zhu Qingzhu was not assured, so he specially sent people to the Cloud Sky Pavilion. The people of the Cloud Sky Pavilion said that the so-called submarine was simply copied from the underwater reconnaissance ship of the Cloud Sky Pavilion. The so-called torpedoes had never been heard of. Therefore, Zhu Qingzhu did not pay much attention to it. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Countless crystal arrows were shot. Thousands of crystal arrows were shot fiercely at the torpedoes. The speed of the crystal arrows was countless times faster, and they had arrived in the blink of an eye. Bang, 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 bang. Although the accuracy was not very high, there were too many of them, and they were too dense. Still, a small half of the torpedoes were directly hit. These crystal arrows were really incomparably domineering. Such a hard torpedo was directly shot into and nailed to the top. Then, the trajectory of these torpedoes completely changed, and they suddenly drilled to God knows where. But the good news was that these torpedoes were not detonated. The torpedoes were shot by the crystal arrows. This was already mentally prepared for a long time. So once they were hit, they must not be detonated. Therefore, all the torpedo detonation devices were very strict. It required an extremely huge vibration energy to detonate. And this vibration energy was the result of the torpedoes weighing hundreds of kilograms. After moving forward and hitting the target, it achieved the purpose of the crystal explosion. This detonation device directly hit the top of the torpedo, and these crystal swords, even if they hit the top of the torpedo, either directly destroyed the detonation device and directly scrapped, or there was insufficient vibration energy. The energy of these crystal arrows was amazing, but it could not be compared with the energy of the torpedo hitting the warship. Especially since these crystal arrows were so sharp, they directly penetrated, so the energy was relatively insufficient. The distance of a mile for the torpedo was more than half a minute. The water ghosts did not have time to shoot the third arrow. The huge torpedo hit the huge warship. Bang! The torpedo fiercely tore the ship's deck and directly penetrated a few feet. The people on the warship only felt a sudden shock. Boom! Then there was a monstrous explosion. The energy of hundreds of kilograms of high explosives plus special crystal stones was incomparably amazing. The huge explosion directly burst out a huge wave of dozens of meters high, and then the entire warship was violently torn from the middle. Then the entire warship was instantly smashed to pieces, and some warships were directly hit by 4 or 5 torpedoes. Boom, 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 boom. During the fierce explosion, the entire warship, like a toy, was violently thrown into the air and then ruthlessly torn to pieces. Then, all the pieces were completely engulfed by the soaring flames. In this round, more than 1,000 torpedoes were shot out, but a small half were destroyed, and then a small half were shot off. In the end, less than a quarter of the torpedoes hit the target, only 200 to 300 torpedoes. But the Central State Fleet was too concentrated. Being hit by 200 to 300 torpedoes was also incomparably terrifying. Everyone only saw countless huge waves on the surface of the sea. Then the warships, one by one, were violently smashed to pieces. Balls of fire fiercely shot up to the sky. The concentrated explosion, like a huge thunder, suddenly rang out. Boom, 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 boom. More than 200 warships of the Central State Fleet were instantly smashed to pieces. The entire sea surface instantly raged, rolled, and boiled. Yang Dingtian looked at Qiu Wanjie and Qin Wanchou at the side in astonishment, and said, Zhu Qingzhu, didn't you already know about our submarine tactic? And didn't you already make preparations? Why the losses are still so big? Yes, Qin Wanchou said. How did it become like this? Qiu Wanjie was instantly incomparably excited, and said loudly, Sect leader, this submarine is something. Then Qiu Wanjie said, I even feel that we don't need the submarine to shoot. The surface warships can also shoot the submarine. As long as the problem of accuracy is solved, our navy, directly invincible. Qiu Wanjie was also completely stunned. The disparity in strength between the two sides was almost 100 to 1. Even the warships were 20 to 1. Why did they lose so badly the moment the battle started? 1 to 200 warships, directly smashed to pieces. As for the submarine and torpedoes, he had received intelligence and used all his strength to deal with it and set up underwater crystal crossbows. To be honest, he didn't care much about the submarine and torpedoes, but who would have thought that the destructive power of this thing was so shocking? But there was still no technology. The Western Fleet, who had tasted the sweetness, immediately gave the order. The two submarine fleets immediately attacked with all their strength. Instantly, the two submarine fleets seemed to have taken stimulants. They aimed at the target and fired their torpedoes. So. Instantly, countless torpedoes fiercely drilled out. The two fleets of the Central State Fleet desperately changed directions and desperately fired their crystal crossbows underwater. Boom, 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 boom. Again, countless explosions. Countless warships were blasted into smithereens. Zhu Qingzhu looked at the surface of the sea, where the warships were swallowed by the flames and were completely smashed to pieces. Countless soldiers, like dumplings, fell to the surface of the water. Instantly, his heart was in pain. Two fleets, retreat, retreat. Zhu Qingzhu immediately gave the order. In the first battle, both sides had seriously underestimated the submarine. Zhu Qingzhu almost didn't put the submarine in his eyes, and Yang Dingtian was affected by Earth. Once the submarine was discovered, it would mean a dead end. Thus, after the submarine tactic was exposed, he almost didn't have any hope for the submarine fleet. The reason why Yang Dingtian gave the submarine fleet the first wave of attack was to train the soldiers. But no one would have thought that even after Zhu Qingzhu was prepared, the submarine fleet's results were still so good. After Zhu Qingzhu ordered the two fleets to temporarily retreat, the 1,000 warships on the two fleets were in a mess. Because there were flames everywhere, and there were fragments of warships everywhere. The Western Fleet immediately took the opportunity to attack. They shot out torpedoes one after another. However, the hydrological environment was too chaotic now, and there were too many underwater obstacles. Therefore, the torpedoes' hit rate dropped again. Suddenly, the submarine fleet, which was boiling with blood, crazily approached within a few miles, then aimed and fired. Boom! 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 Earth-shattering explosions were everywhere. One warship after another directly turned into raging flames, and then was smashed to pieces. The two fleets of Zhengzhou had never fought such a useless naval battle. Nowadays, naval battles in the chaotic world were basically shooting crystal crossbows first. Then the two ships approached and shot at each other with crossbows. Finally, they jumped onto the enemy's ship and directly fought with weapons. Yang Dingtian's artillery battle was already enough to lead. Now he directly used the submarine battle. Although the commanders of the Zhengzhou fleet also knew about this, there was no precedent. Everyone felt that those things could hit them in the water. They didn't believe it. When the battle really happened, this group of people almost went crazy. How could they fight such a ghost battle? The enemy could hit you from a long distance, and you didn't even know where the enemy was. What's more, you didn't even know if the enemy had hit you or not. Once they knew, it would be over. Therefore, the retreating fleets of the two wings were completely in a mess. When they retreated, their formation was also in chaos. The ships crowded and bumped into each other. At this moment, everyone knew. It turned out that naval battles were not better with more ships. At this time, the daring submarine fleet was about to go crazy. They directly bit within 2 to 3 miles of the enemy fleet. Then, like a wolf, they stared at their opponent and fired torpedoes one after another. And the water ghosts under the enemy's warships fired crystal arrows, even more crazily. But now the water was even more deadly. There were corpses everywhere. And there were fragments everywhere. It was even more difficult to aim and shoot. After all, the size of the torpedo was still not big enough. And the submarine was now a big warship. Because it was close, it aimed more accurately. However, because the entire seabed was boiling now, it was completely impossible to see. It was impossible to aim at it. It could only shoot randomly. Therefore, even though they were arrogant, their hit rate dropped sharply. Suddenly, some of the torpedo launchers discovered that the crystal crossbows below the warships were red in color through the underwater telescopes. Therefore, they directly aimed at these red colors as if they had obtained a treasure. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. This time, it was too accurate. More and more submarine launchers discovered this secret and fired crazily. Suddenly, the retreating fleets of the two wings were completely unlucky. Boom, 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 boom. One after another explosions. Countless fireballs rose into the air. Then, the two wings of the Zhongzhou fleet almost disappeared into the sea like this. It was as if the biggest fireworks were set off. Damn, Zhu Qingzhu, weren't you prepared? Why did you lose so miserably? Yang Dingtian almost couldn't help but ask loudly. Chapter 550. Whether it was Zhu Qingzhu of the Central Continent Fleet, or Yang Dingtian of the Western Fleet, they were all completely shocked by this scene. They watched as the two wings of the Central Continent Fleet quickly disappeared into the sea. The outcome of the first battle was something that no one would have expected. It was especially so for Yang Dingtian, as he didn't have much hope for submarine warfare. As for Zhu Qingzhu, he did not put the submarine in his heart. In the end, he had forcefully created this outcome. It seemed that when something reached a certain level, even if the secret was leaked, it would be hard for there to be a huge change. Just like how Zhu Qingzhu had already known about the submarine strategy, but the first battle still ended in a crushing defeat. Just like this, the two wings of the Central Continent Fleet retreated in a panic. Then, they were bitten by the submarine and sunk one by one. In the beginning, explosions and fireballs were everywhere on the surface of the sea. Ships were smashed into pieces everywhere. Later on, the surviving fleets became more and more sparse. In the end, more than 10 submarines surrounded a single ship and attacked it. Hence, the explosions were not as dense as before. However, the scene was even more shocking and tragic. More than 10 submarines surrounded a warship and attacked it. This scene was too beautiful, and one could not bear to look at it. More than 10 torpedoes, after hitting the target, the entire warship was smashed into pieces. Even the scene of it sinking could not be seen. An hour later, the first battle between the two armies had ended. Less than 20% of the 1,000 fleets of the Central Continent Fleet returned to the formation in a panic. The submarines of the Western Fleet went berserk and actually wanted to charge into the Central Continent Army's formation. Yang Dingtian and Qiu Wanjie quickly ordered a temporary retreat. One must know that there were still more than 10,000 ships in the Central Continent Army. There were crystal crossbows under the ships. If they got close to the Central Army, those crystal crossbows might not be able to pierce through the outer shell of the submarines. Facing such a situation, the entire Central Continent Army was silent. On Zhu Qingzhu's flagship, all the leaders of the Central Continent Army were present. Everyone looked at each other, their faces turning green. No one had thought that this would be the outcome. They had thought that they would be able to easily crush the enemy. Who would have thought that before the two wings could complete the encirclement, 1,000 fleets on the two wings were almost completely wiped out? Moreover, they didn't even see where the enemy was. This fight was too cowardly and too tragic. Moreover, it was said that this submarine was completely conceived by Yang Dingtian, including the torpedo, the explosives, and the cannons. They were all designed by Yang Dingtian alone. Immediately, Yang Dingtian's image became mysterious and terrifying in the hearts of the leaders of the various factions in the central region. Previously, when everyone had to choose a side, everyone had chosen Zhu Qingzhu's side without any hesitation. If Yang Dingtian and Zhu Qingzhu had to choose a side, anyone with a brain would know which side to stand on. Therefore, Qin Wanqiu, Qiu Wanjie, and Song Xiao stood on Yang Dingtian's side. In the eyes of the Central Continent's forces, they were either forced into helplessness or had water in their heads. Now, it seemed that it did make some sense. This Yang Dingtian was indeed a little strange. The leaders of the factions of the Middle Continent could not help but waver. Of course, it was only a slight waver. They did not doubt the final victory of this war. Although the Central Continent's army had lost a few hundred warships, it was not damaged at all. It was still dozens of times stronger than the Western side's army. Seeing that everyone's morale was low, Zhu Qingzhu suddenly laughed and said, "Yang Dingtian, this brat has some skills. However, it's because he has some skills that it's fun to fight. Otherwise, what's the point of being trampled to death?" Everyone forced a smile and agreed. Zhu Qingzhu continued. Then, what do you think about Yang Dingtian's submarine? How do we destroy it? Instantly, everyone started to offer suggestions. However, it was difficult to be completely effective. In the end, someone suggested that they might as well send Martial Venerables into the water to destroy all the submarines. When this idea was proposed, everyone fell silent. Would this idea work? It would be very useful because the Central Continent's army had countless Martial Venerables and above. If they really wanted to dive into the water to destroy the submarines, it would be very easy. However, there was a principle involved. That was, when the army fought, the high-level martial artists would not appear. Although this was not a rule on the surface, almost everyone would abide by it. Unless it was an apocalyptic war with the evil ways, the experts would come out in full force. In other wars, the army would fight the army, and the martial artists would fight the martial artists. It was very clear. If a large number of Martial Venerables were to destroy the submarines, then there would definitely be a situation. The Martial Venerables and Grandmasters of the western side would all move out. They would kill all the Martial Venerables of the Central Continent at the bottom of the sea. Then, the Grandmasters and Grandmasters of the Central Continent would all move out. Then, the top experts of the Central Continent and the western side would fight in advance. At that time, it would be a fight to the death. Therefore, both sides were very tacit to avoid such a situation. It was unrealistic to send a few hundred Martial Venerables to destroy the submarines of the western side. If that was the case, it would be really troublesome. The leaders of the Central Continent's army were helpless against Yang Dingtian's submarine army. Zhu Qingzhu slowly closed his eyes and sighed. If that's the case, is there no other way? Our more than 10,000 warships are actually frightened by a few hundred iron shells? At this moment, someone suddenly said, "There is a way." "Speak," Zhu Qingzhu said. "Night battle." The person said, "These submarines are underwater. I heard that every time they attack, they have to float up and aim at the target before firing. Therefore, we will wait for night battle. After dark, we will send a few hundred warships to disperse and surround the western side's fleet. As long as the western side is surrounded, it will be over," the person said. Zhu Qingzhu closed his eyes and said slowly, "That makes sense." At this moment, there were still more than 6 hours before the sky turned dark. The Central Continent's fleet began to prepare. They used the smallest and fastest warships to surround the enemy at night. Now they also realized that the faster the warship, the better. The Central Continent's fleet stopped and formed a defensive formation, resembling the fangs of a dog. "Sect leader, the Central Continent's army is afraid of us. They have temporarily stopped fighting." Qiu Wanjie said, "Should we pursue them?" Yang Dingtian was silent for a moment and shook his head. "No, the enemy's warships are too many. More than 10,000 warships densely packed. If we have the Demon Vulture army, it would be best if we could launch an air attack. But we don't have the Demon Vulture army anymore. Why don't our main fleet rush up and throw kerosene bombs?" Song Chunhua said. Yang Dingtian shook his head. "No." Then, Yang Dingtian said to everyone, "Everyone, I have absolute confidence in winning this naval battle. Therefore, victory is not the most important thing in this naval battle. The most important thing is to train the troops. Our future navy has 2 main forces. One is the submarines, the other is the cannons. Especially the cannons, they are the absolute main force." Yang Dingtian continued, "Why can't our cannons become the main force this time? That's because we have too few warships, and they are not fast enough. Therefore, we are unable to form a suppressive fire, so we have to give up on the cannons. But it can be said that the cannons are our greatest direction in the future." Yang Dingtian was absolutely right. Using the crystal crossbow to throw kerosene barrels was not bad. It could be thrown for dozens of li. But the accuracy was incomparably ridiculous. Not every naval battle was like this, where the Central State Fleet was densely packed and lined up in a pile to fight with you. And now, no matter how densely the Central State Fleet was, they were scattered over hundreds of li of sea. Every warship was at least 100 meters apart. Therefore, although it looked like a secret manual, If they really threw kerosene barrels, the accuracy was extremely low. If Yang Dingtian had large cannons now, he did not need many. A few hundred of them would be enough to completely surround the Central State Fleet and completely suppress them. Unfortunately, Yang Dingtian did not have any specialized cannons now. It was completely improvised. The cannons were also very simple, and one warship could only hold a few cannons. The enemy should want to fight at night. Qiu Wanjie suddenly said, when our submarines want to aim at the enemy warships, they need to float up and aim at the target. Once we fight at night, it will be even darker underwater. The submarine fleet was originally almost blind, but now they are completely blind. When Qiu Wanjie's words fell, everyone agreed. Zhu Qingzhu's temporary ceasefire should be to surround them at night and make the submarine fleet blind. At this moment, there were also a few captains of the submarines in the meeting. Because they had just participated in the battle, they had the most right to speak. Hearing that there was going to be a night battle, a submarine commander suddenly laughed. A night battle is the best. Speaking of which, it is definitely an unexpected surprise. We used energy crystals to create underwater telescopes to see that the crystal crossbows under the enemy's warships are actually bright red. It is very obvious. The darker it is, the more obvious it is. Therefore, aiming in a night battle is not a problem. If Zhu Qingzhu wants to send out a night battle, that would be the best. Everyone was overjoyed when they heard this. Qiu Wanjie said, is that so? It is indeed so. The submarine commander said. The naval battle just now was very chaotic towards the end. There were corpses and fragments underwater, so it was impossible to aim accurately. We accidentally saw that the crystal crossbows were bright red in the telescopes, so we were able to aim even more accurately. Within 3 to 4 li, almost every shot hit. Qiu Wanjie was overjoyed. That's good. After the submarine fleet is replenished, immediately go to the place where the enemy will pass by and set up an ambush. This time, we will make Zhu Qingzhu's fleet unable to return. We will make it even more painful for him. Yes, a few submarine captains said. There are still 4 more hours before the sky turns dark. During this time, are we not going to do anything? Song Chunhua suddenly said. Yang Dingtian said, what is the fastest speed of our cannons? 2 hours, 280 li, Song Chunhua said. However, those ships are very small and can only fit 4 to 5 cannons. How many ships are there in total? Yang Dingtian asked. 40 to 50. Send them out to harass the Central Continent Fleet and use the cannons to train the soldiers. Yang Dingtian said, remember, attack when the enemy chases you. Don't enter the shooting range of the Central Continent Fleet's crystal crossbows. Attack from afar, at least 10 to 20 li away. It doesn't matter if the cannons can't hit accurately. It is just for practice, Song Chunhua said. However, once the enemy's winged cavalry moves out, it will be very troublesome. Send a large number of winged cavalry to escort them in the air. Stay far away, and don't get too close, Yang Dingtian said. I am sure that Zhu Qingzhu will not be willing to send out his main air force for such a small-scale sneak attack. His Golden Eagle Legion must be reserved for a fatal blow. They think that they will win this war, so they will definitely show their strength. Therefore, if they send out 100,000 air force now, it will be an unfair victory for them. Zhu Qingzhu will definitely not do this. Yes, Song Chunhua said. 15 minutes later, 50 crystal cannons received the order and immediately set off. They quickly rushed towards the Central Continent Fleet. Looking from the sky, the 50 crystal cannons were like a needle that was going to pierce the giant Central Continent Fleet. Zhu Qingzhu was the flagship of the Central Continent Fleet. Sect Master, Yang Dingtian's army in the west has sent out a fleet to attack our right side, a warrior reported. How many ships? Zhu Qingzhu asked. About 50, the warrior said. Big ships? Small ships? Zhu Qingzhu asked. Small ships, the warrior said. Zhu Qingzhu immediately frowned and felt disgusted. Yang Dingtian, this bastard, was purely sending 50 small ships to disgust them. Don't worry too much. Once they get close to our fleet, immediately send out 200 warships to annihilate them, Zhu Qingzhu said. Yes, Yang Dingtian's 50 cannons were very fast. In just half an hour, they were 20 to 30 miles away from the right side of the Central Continent Fleet. Seeing that a few dozen small ships dared to provoke them, the Central Continent Fleet was disgusted and immediately fired thousands of arrows. The crystal crossbows on the hundreds of warships were fired. The momentum was good, but the crystal crossbows relied on the physical energy of the arrows, not to mention whether they could hit the target 20 miles away. Even if they did, it was useless. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Thousands of huge crossbow arrows were shot out. 95% of them missed. The remaining 5% hit Yang Dingtian's cannons. However, the arrows only left a shallow hole on the cannons from 20 miles away. They couldn't even penetrate it. Fire! The commander of the harassment cannons fleet suddenly ordered. Boom 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 boom. Immediately, the hundreds of cannons on the 50 cannons fired. With a deafening sound, hundreds of cannonballs flew out. Immediately, countless people stared at the cannonballs whistling over. The people on the Central Continent Fleet felt extremely nervous. Bang 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 bang. Soon the cannonballs flew more than 20 miles and smashed down. Then, almost 99% of them missed. At this distance, the accuracy of the cannons on the sea was even more impressive than the crystal crossbows. At least 5% of the crystal crossbows hit. This cannon missed 99% of them. It fell directly into the sea, and a splash was heard. Boom 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 boom. Then it suddenly exploded, setting off bursts of waves. That's right, the cannons of the Western Fleet were specially made. After firing, once they fell into the water, they would explode. Walalala. On the right side of the Central Continent Fleet, most of them were fine. They saw a big splash for free. Unfortunately, the cannonball exploded on the side of the ship, splashing water on the head. Then the entire Central Continent Fleet laughed. Yang Dingtian's side was almost speechless. They were really unlucky. Such a dense fleet, hundreds of cannons, but none of them hit. This was really strange. Even if they touched it randomly, they could hit a few. The most ridiculous thing was that one of the cannonballs actually deviated more than 10 miles, a total of more than 20 miles. Later, the people on the cannons found that the entire cannonball was collectively deviated far to the right, so not a single one hit. When Zhu Qingzhu and the others saw this scene, they suddenly laughed. All the leaders of the Central Continent also laughed. This cannon, it's okay to put it on the ground, but to put it on the sea, it's really nonsense. Someone laughed. Immediately, everyone nodded in agreement. The cannons of the fleet suddenly turned red with anger. They gritted their teeth and adjusted the angle. Fire! With an order, hundreds of cannons were fired again. Looking at the hundreds of cannonballs flying over, the army of the Central Continent completely ignored them. They all raised their heads, waiting to see the free fireworks show. Then, some of them were horrified to find that the cannonballs were getting closer and closer. They were about to hit the top of their heads. Fire the crystal crossbows, fire. Then the warship was in a mess. Suddenly, the crystal crossbows on the warship were fired into the air, trying to directly hit the cannonballs. However, the cannonballs were too fast and too small. If the crystal crossbows could hit them, it was completely dog shit luck. Bang! The cannonballs fiercely smashed into the warship. Boom! Then there was a violent explosion. In an instant, flesh and blood splattered in an area of more than 10 meters around the cannonball. A big hole was blown in the warship. Boom 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 boom. Although this time, the hit rate was only 5%. Dozens of cannonballs hit, causing huge losses. More than a dozen warships of the Central Continent Fleet were hit. 2 of them were directly sunk, and the remaining 10 or so were either seriously injured or slightly injured. Zhu Qingzhu and the others' faces suddenly changed, and they shouted angrily, "Crystal crossbows, fire back!" Suddenly, 200 to 300 crystal crossbows fired one after another. And the 50 cannon warships also fired one after another. Both sides immediately fired at each other on the sea. It had to be said that the hit rate of the crystal crossbows was much higher. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Boom 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 boom. The hit rate of both sides was getting higher and higher. In the end, the hit rate of the crystal crossbows was stable at about 30%. and the hit rate of the cannons was stable at about 15%. However, the crystal crossbows completely relied on physical power. At the end of its flight, it couldn't penetrate. A high hit rate was useless, the lethality was too small. But the cannons were different. Once hit, they would explode. At least dozens of lives were taken. A few cannonballs directly sank a warship. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Boom 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 boom. Both sides fired at each other, round after round. After more than 30 rounds of shooting, the Central Continent Fleet was shocked to find that 39 warships on their right wing had been sunk, 7 or 8 were seriously injured, and 100 were slightly injured. As for the Western Fleet, almost every ship was densely packed with them. However, not a single ship sank, and only a dozen or so people died. The result of the battle was true disparity. The faces of the leaders of the Central Continent Fleet paled at this sight. This was only 50 ships. If the Western cannon warships were bigger, each ship would have dozens of cannons, and then there would be hundreds of warships. Then this battle would be useless. Sectmaster, send out the Golden Condor Army. I guarantee that these damn cannon warships will be wiped out in 15 minutes. The Eagle Nest City Lord said. Zhu Qingzhu shook his head and sneered. Yang Dingtian only sent out a few dozen ships, and I have to use my trump card. Even if we win, it will be a disgrace. Then, Zhu Qingzhu said, order the fastest crystal warship to be loaded with crystal crossbows and chase the enemy's cannon warships. Yes. 15 minutes later, more than 100 crystal warships of the Central Continent Fleet quickly rushed out and charged at the Western Fleet's 50 cannon warships. In this 15 minutes, the Western Fleet's cannon warships were killing to their heart's content. They were so daring that they were more than 10 miles away from the right side of the Central Continent Fleet. Their accuracy had greatly increased, and in this 15 minutes, they had sunk another 20 warships. At this moment, more than 100 crystal warships of the Central Continent Fleet suddenly rushed out. Retreat! The commander of the Crystal Cannon Fleet did not want to continue fighting and directly ordered a retreat. The 100 crystal warships of the Central Continent Fleet naturally chased after them, and while chasing, they fired crystal crossbows. The Western Fleet's cannon warships also quickly fled, and while running, they fired their cannons. In this way, the accuracy of both sides was almost zero. Therefore, a very exciting scene appeared on the sea surface. 100 warships desperately chased, while 50 warships desperately fled. However, the Western Fleet's cannon warships were not simply fleeing. They began to form a formation, and no longer fired blindly. Hundreds of cannons were aimed at the 10 or so enemy warships. Moreover, they kept a distance of 15 miles from the enemy. In this way, the situation had changed again. With hundreds of cannons firing at the 10 or so warships, even if the accuracy was terrible, they would still be able to hit. Therefore, the Central Continent Fleet began to suffer. One warship after another was sunk. As for the Western Fleet's cannon fleet, they would run after firing, and they would always be more than 10 miles away from them. The crystal crossbows could hit them, but it was useless. Even if they hit them from 10 miles away, it would only be like scratching an itch. But if the cannons hit them, it would be different. The Central Continent Fleet was also a small ship, and if it was hit by a cannonball, the entire ship would basically be scrapped. In this way, the Central Continent Fleet looked very valiant, and they were suppressing the enemy. However, the more they fought, the fewer they were, and the more they fought, the fewer they were. In the end, when they were more than 100 miles away from their base, they discovered to their horror that only half of them were left. Zhu Qingzhu's side almost vomited blood. When he saw that less than half of the 100 warships were left, he immediately ordered a retreat. However, when they retreated, the shameless Western Fleet unexpectedly caught up, and then shamelessly fired hundreds of cannons at the warships. Therefore, the Central Continent Fleet ran while remaining silent. After a few dozen miles, another 10 or so warships were sunk, and only 20 or so warships were left. The Central Continent Fleet was furious, and the remaining 20 or so warships stopped running. They crazily charged forward, wanting to perish together with the Western Fleet. However, Those fucking shameless cannon fleets turned around and fled again. Bastard, bastard. The Central Continent fleet was about to go crazy. They had never seen such a shameless warship before. I only have 20 or so warships, not even half of yours. And you still want to run? In short, the Western fleet always maintained a distance of 15 miles away from the enemy, and always used hundreds of cannons to aim at the enemy warships. In this way, the tragic and unresigned Central Continent fleet continued to search silently. When there were only 10 or so warships left, the Western fleet suddenly stopped running and directly formed a formation on the sea, waiting for the 10 warships to come closer. Closer, closer, closer. When the enemy warships were 10 miles away, the 50 warships crazily fired in unison. Boom, 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 boom. Instantly the sea was filled with smoke, and the flames were dazzling. 15 minutes later, the 10 warships of the Central Continent fleet were all silent. At this point, the 100 warships sent by Central Continent had all been destroyed after 5 hours of intense battle. The 50 warships were like hedgehogs, filled with arrows as they returned to the formation. In the first battle, the Central Continent fleet lost miserably, and close to 1,000 warships were sunk. In the second battle, it was just a small harassment. In the end, the 50 warships used the shameless tactic of running while attacking, and they sunk 200 warships of the Central Continent fleet. The Western fleet cheered like heroes, welcoming the return of the 50 warships. As for the Central Continent fleet, the morale was at an all-time low. They were so useless. Their 10,000 warships were completely suppressed by the enemy's few hundred warships. In a single day, they had sunk 1,000 warships. Although they did not suffer any serious injuries, they were still so useless. Some people even blamed Zhu Qingzhu. He had close to 100,000 winged cavalry warriors, and he had the Golden Eagle Legion, but he did not use them. He had 3,000 to 4,000 warships, and he could have just charged forward, but he did not do so. He wanted to win glory, but in the end, he was beaten so badly. In the flagship of the Central Continent Army, Zhu Qingzhu's entire body was green, and he was so angry that blood was about to gush out. This battle was truly a fucking cowardly one. He really had the urge to send out 100,000 winged cavalry warriors to tear the Western fleet apart. However, if he were to do so, his reputation would be completely ruined. If Zhu Qingzhu had done this at the start and destroyed the Western fleet, he would have been like a tiger that did not take the Western fleet seriously. However, now that he had lost 2 battles in a row, people would only say that he was useless. His navy was dozens of times stronger than the enemy, yet he still could not win, and he still had to rely on the air force. Zhu Qingzhu could not bear the pressure of public opinion, hence he had to win this battle. If he could not, the morale would be at an all-time low. Don't worry, sect leader. We will definitely win tonight's battle, the Navy chief beside him said. The Western fleet's trump card has been used up. The submarines can't be aimed at night, and the cannons can't be aimed at night either. We will definitely win tonight's battle. As long as we completely surround them, our fleet will be able to crush them easily. Yes, Zhu Qingzhu said. If you can, don't use the winged cavalry warriors. I can't afford to lose face like this. Yes, the Navy chief said. How many warships should we send out for the night battle? 1,300 warships. We must completely surround Yang Dingtian's fleet, Zhu Qingzhu said. Yes. An hour later, in the night, the 1,300 warships of the Central Continent fleet moved to the flanks. They took advantage of the night to secretly surround Yang Dingtian's fleet. As for the Western fleet's submarine fleet, they had already replenished their torpedoes and were quietly lying in ambush, waiting for their prey to enter. Chapter 551. Without sonar detectors, submarines were almost blind. And the submarines of the Western world were even more blind. So every time they wanted to fire a torpedo, they needed to float up, and then extend a long tube through the crystal telescope to aim. Even when shooting, they also proposed an even more exaggerated aiming method. That was to use the strong light of the scorching sun crystal to aim underwater. Once it shone on the target, a red light would appear. This already had the taste of the laser sight of a modern gun. Unfortunately, it had not taken shape yet, so it could not be used in this naval battle. In short, the wisdom of man was endless. Including the rough gyroscope that Yang Dingtian proposed, it had also been created. However, this time, it could not enter the actual battle, so it could not be loaded with torpedoes. There were still many problems that had not been solved. But in short, Yang Dingtian's current crude submarine was like a blind man during the night. And when the special crystal telescope aimed at the energy array of the enemy's underwater crystal, a dazzling red spot would appear. This was definitely an unexpected surprise. This also made it possible for the blind submarine of the Western world to participate in the battle at night. However, the vast sea was simply too big. At least the initial range of the enemy's ship needed to be indicated in the air. Otherwise, looking for the red spot of the crystal energy array in the vast sea would definitely be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Now Yang Dingtian finally understood that the so-called naval battle in the current chaotic world was actually completely the style of a land battle. The two armies faced each other, arranged their troops, and then each formation attacked. The flying mounts of the Western Army fleet in the air quickly detected that more than 1,000 warships of the central continent had once again set off from the left and right wings, outflanking the Western fleet from the rear. Then, hundreds of martial mystic level and above experts immediately dived into the water and rang the energy bell. The reason why they dived into the water to ring was to hide. The submarine troops that were lurking on the way immediately received the signal. Their hiding position was basically calculated in advance. It was probably the area where the central continent fleet was most likely to pass through. At this time the signal came. Although their hiding position was not very accurate, it was only a few dozen miles away. The two submarine troops on the left and right immediately sneaked towards the designated position. It was stealthy and fast. As for sneaky, it was basically an adjective. This was because Yang Dingtian's submarine basically did not make any noise. Because it was powered by crystals, it basically did not make any noise. Even on Earth, this submarine would definitely be considered low noise. Furthermore, there was no sonar in the Chaos realm, nor any detection tools. So even if one shouted in the submarine, it would not be a problem. Under the high-speed cruising of the submarine, they soon arrived at the designated location. Then, these submarines began to boldly surface and began to search for the special red spots brought about by the enemy's crystal energy array in the crystal telescope. At this time, the central continent fleet was only less than 10 miles away from the hidden submarines. However, it was nighttime after all. Even if the submarine floated to a certain position, their field of vision was still pitch black. The only way was to search for the crystal energy formation at the bottom of the enemy ship. Speaking of which, the enemy ship definitely had a lot of crystal energy arrays. This was because every warship had a huge crystal energy array, which served as the main driving force of the warship. In addition, more than 10 medium-sized crystal crossbows had been set up underwater. Therefore, the area of the red spot produced by the energy array was quite large. Therefore, after a few minutes of searching, the submarine fleet began to discover red spots one after another. Discovering red spots meant that they had discovered enemy ships. Speaking of which, the submarine warfare at this time was definitely very, very low level. This was because they could not coordinate and command, because the submarines could not communicate with each other. It was not that they could not communicate with each other at all. The few submarines that were closer could still communicate with each other. There were two ways to communicate. The first was the underwater energy clock, and the other was the light crystal array. The former was a small energy clock, and only the surrounding 10 or so submarines could hear this energy clock. The latter was to embed the light crystal array on the four sides of the submarine, ensuring that the light emitted by the light crystal array could be seen from any direction. Then, the light would shine and send out a specific signal. Therefore, the submarine fleet of the Western region was basically 10 to 15 submarines per team. Between the teams, there was still command and cooperation. However, above the surface, they had to completely listen to the commands of the surface. Therefore, basically, The underwater teams were fighting for themselves. It was very difficult to cooperate. Moreover, it was night. Although the submarines could still release light buoys in order to hide, the surface of the water basically did not participate in the command of this ambush. The entire battle power was given to the underwater submarines to freely play. Therefore, the following strange scene appeared. After these submarines locked onto their targets, they could fire their torpedoes at any time. This time, no one would send out an attack signal. The first explosion was the automatic signal to start the battle. In other words, no matter who fired the first torpedo, it would be the signal to start the battle. However, the strange thing was that no one fired a torpedo. Of course, it was not out of pity, but because they wanted to find better conditions. Therefore, this group of bastard submarines actually did not open fire. They chased after their targets, desperately approaching. Next, these submarines would discover that their comrades had locked onto the same target as them. Therefore, at this time, a submarine would retreat and go back to search for the next target. This group of bastards had fought too much during the day, and they actually wanted to have an even more enjoyable time at night. However, this made the people on the surface of the water extremely anxious. In Yang Dingtian's flagship, all the higher-ups began to worry anxiously. Why hadn't the first explosion sounded yet? Why hadn't they opened fire yet? This was impossible. Logically speaking, the submarines should have already approached the enemy fleet. They should have opened fire 15 minutes ago at the latest. Is it because they really can't find the target at night? Zhu Hongxue couldn't help but ask. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be. The enemy fleet is too big of a target. It shouldn't be hard to find them, Qiu Wanjie said. Could it be that the enemy already has underwater weapons and has launched an attack on our submarines? Zhu Hongxue said worriedly. Impossible. Even if our submarines were attacked, there would definitely be a sound, Song Chunhua said. There's no sound at all now. Logically speaking, they should have opened fire 15 minutes ago, but they still haven't opened fire. Is it because they haven't received the order, so no one dares to open fire? Qiu Wanjie said. Yang Dingtian shook his head. That's impossible. The massacre during the day has raised the morale of the submarines. Previously, when we said that we would give them the authority to fight underwater, their eyes were not filled with fear, but excitement. Then what's going on? This is really making me anxious, Qiu Wanjie said. Yang Dingtian said. Perhaps this group of daring enemies felt that their position was not good enough and wanted to kill in one blow, so they kept adjusting and following. This is too daring. Qiu Wanjie said. They were just lowly sailors before. It's precisely because they were lowly sailors before that they couldn't show off. Now that there's a stage for them to show off, and in this enclosed underwater space, anyone would go crazy. They are holding their breath, clenching their teeth, and bringing the most glorious battle results to us, Yang Dingtian said. At this time, the Central Continent flagship received the signal from the two flanking fleets, saying that they were almost 100 miles away from the Western Fleet. The Central Continent flagship instantly cheered loudly. This meant that the enemy's gunships and submarines were definitely blind in the night. There was no way for them to block the two flanking fleets of the Central Continent Fleet. Once they completed the encirclement, they would gradually press forward and use the astronomical number of crystal crossbows to shoot. In an instant, they could use the most glorious and spectacular scene to completely destroy the entire Western Fleet. Only in this way could they regain their face. Haha, Yang Dingtian. This clown's submarines and gunships are indeed small tricks that can't be used in public. In one night, they were completely destroyed, Zhu Qingzhu said with a loud laugh. Of course, these were not his true thoughts, but he had to say these words. That's right, tomorrow morning. It will be the time when the Western Fleet is completely destroyed, the Central Continent Navy chief said with a loud laugh. Cheers for the sect leader. Cheers for the sect leader. Instantly, all the chiefs raised their cups and cheered. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion on the surface of the sea. Instantly, everyone's expression changed. The cup in Zhu Qingzhu's hand trembled slightly. Then, everyone rushed out at lightning speed. Instantly, 100 miles away from the Northeast Sea, a fireball soared into the sky. The faces of all the chiefs of the central continent instantly became incomparably ugly. They all held their breaths. But after a long while nothing happened. There was no explosion, no strange movement. The Central Continent Navy chief said, "Everyone, there's no need to worry. This is an accident, a complete accident." Everyone felt relieved and agreed one after another. But just as he finished speaking, boom 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 boom. Boom 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 boom. Almost at the same time, hundreds of fireballs suddenly soared into the sky. Hundreds of explosions sounded at the same time. The first loud sound just now was really like a signal. Once it started, it really couldn't be stopped. Next, the entire sea was completely boiling. In the night, this scene was even more spectacular. The fireworks produced by the explosion of thousands of torpedoes was really shocking. The explosion of each firework represented the destruction of a warship. The scene of this naval battle was much more gorgeous than the submarine battle during the day. The group of beasts in the submarine chased for more than half an hour, and they were still picking and choosing their targets. They even chased the targets to within 4 or 5 miles. In fact, they still wanted to endure it. They couldn't wait to divide the 3 warships evenly between them before they opened fire. But they couldn't not open fire, because the enemy's 2 flanks were almost parallel to the Western fleet. At that time, they couldn't distinguish between the enemy and themselves. Therefore, they had no choice but to open fire. Thus, one of the submarines finally couldn't bear it anymore. "Damn it, I'm almost sticking to this warship. I'm only 3 or 4 miles away. Usually, it's already amazing to let you aim. Now, I'm directly aiming at the big chrysanthemum of the warship, which is the largest crystal energy array. You still don't want me to shoot. I really can't bear it anymore. I don't care anymore." Thus, the submarine suddenly fired 4 torpedoes. Then, without even looking, he directly aimed at the next warship. He had already fixed his eyes on that target. And after the first loud sound, almost all the submarine troops heaved a sigh of relief. They finally opened fire. I've already taken several positions to aim, from the chrysanthemum to the butt, to the lower abdomen to the chest. I've aimed at everything I can. Moreover, there was no limit to the best battle environment in time. Therefore, after the first loud sound, all the submarines couldn't bear it anymore. Whoosh 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 whoosh. All the submarines shot out all the torpedoes in their launch tubes. After shooting out, they didn't even look. Damn it, at such a close distance, they had already aimed for half an hour. If they still couldn't hit it, they would directly slit their throats. After shooting out the first wave of torpedoes, they immediately changed their direction and aimed at the next target. They had already set their eyes on it for a long time. If they were a bit later, it would definitely be snatched by the other beasts. Thus, the beautiful scene above appeared. The hit rate of the torpedoes this time was really high. After shooting out, there was an 80% chance that it would directly hit the chrysanthemum. In an instant, these warships would lose their power and be directly torn apart from the rear. Actually, there was a better way to destroy the enemy. Directly shoot at the heart of the enemy warship, ensuring that it would be torn apart from the middle. If they were lucky, they could even directly throw the warship into the air, shattering it and killing countless people. But the sect leader had said that they should try to destroy the warships, but kill less people. Therefore, shooting the chrysanthemum was the best way. Therefore, the first wave of attack directly destroyed 200 warships. 80% of them had their chrysanthemums exploded. In the first wave, hundreds of warships exploded and were instantly destroyed. This result scared the Central Continent Fleet and the Western Continent Fleet to the core. What kind of battle did these beasts fight? In the day, the light was so good, but the first wave barely sank 20 to 30 warships. At night, you hit 200 ships with your first wave. More than 200 fireworks exploded at the same time. Long live! The entire Western Province fleet cheered loudly. Fuck. The one who cursed was from the cannon fleet. In the day they were too glorious. 50 warships sinking 200 of the enemy's warships. They really felt good about themselves. But at night, the submarine fleet sank so many warships in the first wave. Wasn't this a slap in the face? Fuck, If the sect leader didn't temporarily focus on these broken iron cans, how could we be as impressive as them? A cannon fleet commander said sourly, just wait. The sect leader said that in the future, the Navy will still mainly rely on cannon fleet. He wants to build a giant warship with hundreds of cannons. At that time, our glorious days will come. Those submarine monsters will eat our dust. Yes, yes, let them be proud for a while. In the future, it will still be our world. Everyone said. When the Central Province fleet saw this scene, their liver trembled. What the fuck were they shooting at? They must have discussed it beforehand. They must have directly pressed the bombs on their warships and exploded. Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence? Hundreds of fireballs exploded at the same time, and then 100 to 200 warships fell silent at the same time. However, this was only the beginning. Next, the crazy performance of the submarines began. After shooting the first wave, the submarines immediately aimed at the second target and immediately shot out. This time, it would be better if they could hit the chrysanthemum, but it didn't matter if they couldn't. The belly of the ship was bigger. Moreover, after shooting they couldn't ignore it. After shooting, they immediately injected the torpedo into the launch tube. At this time, the torpedo in front had not reached the target and had not exploded. They aimed at the target again and fired from other directions. After the first wave of explosion, it was quiet for a few minutes, making people think that the battle was about to stop. The second wave of explosion sounded again. On the dark sea, a gorgeous fireworks performance erupted again. However, this time, it wasn't so neat, and there weren't so many. The hit rate directly dropped by half. However, it was still absolutely shocking. Hundreds of warships were directly hit. Moreover, the second wave of attacks was much crueler. Many of them were directly torn apart from the middle. The soldiers on the ships were instantly smashed into pieces and thrown into the air. Moreover, some warships didn't fall silent after being hit. Soon, the second and third waves of torpedoes followed closely behind. They were completely smashed into pieces. After the third wave and the fourth wave, the battle on the sea was finally no longer neat. It was completely chaotic. Explosions rose and fell one after another. The Central State Fleet didn't sink wave by wave, nor did hundreds of fireworks bloom at the same time. Basically, there were explosions everywhere. There was silence everywhere. One ship after another. During the day, the water ghosts under the warships could still shoot crystal crossbows to destroy the torpedoes. At night, they became completely blind. They shot randomly with their eyes closed. It was really strange that they could hit this time. Moreover, at night, after the two flanks of the Central State Fleet were attacked, they were even more miserable than during the day. They were completely in a mess. All the ships fled in all directions. However, on the ground, once the enemy began to retreat, it would be very difficult to destroy them. However, this was the sea, and large warships were very cumbersome. Once they began to flee in all directions, the only result was that all the ships were jammed together, and no one could move. Thus, the Western Army's submarine force felt good. They were all packed together in a dense cluster. Every shot was accurate. That feeling was so good that they couldn't stop. Next, there were even some submarines that created a miracle of sinking 2 warships with 1 torpedo. No one could save the more than 1,000 warships of the Central State Fleet in the night battle. On the flagship, when Zhu Qingzhu saw that the ordinary warships were already burning, he knew that the battle was over. During the day, there were still 200 to 300 ships that escaped. This time, they were destined to be completely wiped out. There was no need to look. This time, they were completely wiped out. They were defeated even more miserably than during the day. Sect Master, should we send the Golden Eagle Legion? The Navy commander said in a trembling voice. Go and save the 2 flanks. How? Let the Golden Eagle Legion carry those warships back, or dive into the water and destroy the Central State Fleet's submarines. Zhu Qingzhu said indifferently. The Central State Fleet's commander trembled and was speechless. He muttered to himself, aren't submarines even more invisible at night? How is that possible? How is that possible? At this moment, seeing that all the leaders were looking at Zhu Qingzhu strangely, the Navy commander immediately knelt down and said, Sect Master, This defeat is all my fault. Please punish me severely. At this moment, as the commander of the navy, he naturally had to share Zhu Qingzhu's burden. Zhu Qingzhu looked at him indifferently and patted his shoulder lightly. Then he returned to the cabin with a pale face. The battle continued, but the explosions were getting sparser and sparser. The fireballs were getting fewer and fewer. That was because the two flanks of the Central State Fleet were getting smaller and smaller. It was even more difficult for the warships to escape at night. The Central State Fleet couldn't stop the sinking of the warships one by one. The Central State Fleet was no longer watching. Their morale was at an all-time low. As for the Western Fleet, they were in high spirits. Even if the scene wasn't as big as before, they could only watch as the warships sank one by one. However, even if there was less meat, it was still a dish. Thus, for a few hours, the cheers on the surface of the sea never stopped. Long live the sect master! Long live the sect master! Although the start of the battle was very neat and beautiful, however, towards the end it became incomparably long, especially the last 100 warships that escaped. The 300 submarines chased them for 2 to 4 hours. In the end, 20 to 30 warships managed to escape. The 300 submarines couldn't wait to charge into the Central State Fleet. In the end, the Western Fleet had no choice but to sound the retreat signal. The entire night battle, starting at night, lasted for a total of 8 hours. It only ended in the wee hours of the morning. The Central State Fleet sent out a total of 1,300 warships to surround them. In the end, only a few dozen warships managed to escape. It could be said that they were completely wiped out. There was no doubt that this time, they had suffered a great loss. The Central State Fleet had over 10,000 warships, but most of them were troop carriers. There were only about 3,500 warships. In one day and one night, 2,500 warships were sunk. The Central State Fleet only had about 1,000 warships left. They were actually tied with the Western Fleet. Of course, the number of warships was a tie. However, in terms of tonnage, they were 3 to 4 times more than the Western Fleet. However, the Western Fleet had submarines and warships, so they didn't suffer too much losses. Moreover, they still had their trump card, the kerosene barrels, that hadn't been used yet. Therefore, this battle actually produced a situation that Yang Dingtian didn't expect. Unexpectedly, inexplicably, with just the warships and submarines, they were almost able to wipe out the entire Central State Fleet. However, Yang Dingtian only wanted to train his troops. He didn't want to achieve any great results. The entire sea surface was densely packed with people. Even though the Central State Fleet had lost a lot of people in this battle. However, there were still tens of thousands of people who were struggling on the surface of the sea, holding on to the broken boards of their ships. They desperately looked at the Central State Fleet in the distance, hoping that they would come and save them. However, the Central State Fleet was completely silent. There was no response. Therefore, these wounded soldiers gradually lost all hope, waiting for death to come. At this time, there was suddenly a dense wave of cries in the air. Then several thousand winged cavalry warriors flew out from the Western Fleet. They flew above their heads and grabbed them with their claws. Then they soared into the air and flew behind the Western Fleet. There were several thousand different types of simple and crude ships, densely packed together. The flying beasts placed these wounded soldiers on these ships. Then, there were immediately people who came to take care of them, bandaging their wounds, and bringing them food. The wounded soldiers of Central State stared blankly at all this. They allowed the soldiers of the Western Fleet to bandage their wounds, apply medicine, and pour hot food into their mouths. Suddenly, not only did their bodies gradually heat up, but their hearts also gradually heated up. Then tears surged out of their eyes. They didn't expect that after being defeated, they would be hugging a piece of wood on the sea, waiting for Zhu Qingzhu to come and save them. After waiting for several hours, their own people didn't come to save them. When they were waiting for death and despair, Yang Dingtian's people came to save them. Looking at the densely packed ships, everyone knew that Yang Dingtian had mobilized these ships to save people. In the entire Western Fleet, there were only a few hundred ships. However, There were several thousand ships used to save people. No one came to brainwash them. No one said how righteous the Western Fleet was, or how great sect master Yang Dingtian was. And these wounded soldiers of Central State suddenly burst into tears. The battle was completely over. All the submarines had returned. However, everyone in the Western Fleet was still incomparably excited. All the soldiers were sent to their beds to sleep by the officers' clubs. The flagship of the Western Fleet was still brightly lit. Sect Master, I suggest that we launch an all-out attack tomorrow. The commander of the Divine Weapons Manor and the Western Fleet said. Tomorrow. Song Chunhua said. Are you confident? Yes. Although the enemy still has more than 10,000 ships, there are only about 1,000 true warships. The troop transport ships are slow and only have a small number of crystal crossbows. Their combat ability is very ordinary. As long as we destroy the 1,000 warships of Central State, the 10,000 troop transport ships will have nowhere to go. They can only be slaughtered like fish. Qiu Wanjie said loudly. Tomorrow's battle will definitely be able to destroy the Central State Fleet in one fell swoop. Chapter 552. After hearing Qiu Wanjie's suggestion to carry out the decisive battle tomorrow, Yang Dingtian went silent for a moment before replying. I will say the same thing again. The Central Province has over 10,000 warships. We must not fall into a siege or get entangled with them. Otherwise, the crystal crossbows on the 10,000 military transport ships will be able to destroy us. So we can't let victory get to our head. We have to act according to the situation. Also, the enemy has 100,000 flying cavalry. Song Chunhua said. Zhu Qingzhu didn't take action in today's battle because of his face. However, when it comes to the survival of the Central Continent Fleet, he can't care so much about his face. Yang Dingtian said. Also, I believe that tomorrow's battle situation will change. If we plan tomorrow's battle based on today's situation, we will definitely suffer a great loss. Then Yang Dingtian said. Also, whether it is the submarines or the warships, they have fought for almost a day. They need to rest and adjust. Tomorrow, if there are any accidents, we will continue to attack and harass them. We will try our best to destroy the Central Continent warships bit by bit. Yes, everyone said. Yang Dingtian said. But I think that we won't be able to decide how we fight tomorrow. At dawn, a few blackbirds flew out of Zhu Qingzhu's main ship and headed towards Central Continent. After dawn, the second day of the naval battle arrived. Everyone thought that Zhu Qingzhu would be so angry that he would send all the warships and the navy to destroy the Western Army. However, when Zhu Qingzhu's cabin opened, he only sent out an order. Temporarily stop the battle and wait for orders. Instantly, all the leaders didn't say anything, but their gazes became strange. Zhu Qingzhu actually ordered a truce. Could it be that he was afraid of Yang Dingtian? This was too ridiculous. Even though the losses yesterday were huge, they had suffered great losses. However, Central Continent still had more than 10,000 warships and 8 million soldiers. You are actually so scared that you don't dare to fight. The leaders of Central Continent felt vexed. They couldn't help but doubt Zhu Qingzhu. The Central Continent Fleet didn't want to stop the battle, but the Western Fleet didn't show any mercy. The 50 crystal warships rushed out again. This time, they ran to the left wing of the Central Continent Fleet to harass them. They planned to repeat yesterday's battle situation. But without a doubt, the other party will not give you a chance. As soon as the crystal cannons were within 30 li of the Central Continent Fleet's left wing, several hundred golden condors suddenly soared into the sky and soon arrived above the cannons. Although they hadn't swooped down yet, every golden condor warrior's eyes were filled with bone-deep hatred. They were ready to swoop down at any time. The Central State Fleet had finally dispatched the Golden Eagle Legion. However, they remained secretive and did not order the Golden Condor Legion to attack. They only intimidated them. There was no doubt that the defeat yesterday had completely enraged the Central Continent Fleet, and there was a faint feeling that they were about to shed all pretense of cordiality. Yang Dingtian decisively ordered the cannon fleet to retreat. Unwillingly, the 50 crystal cannons retreated to the Western Fleet. Zhu Hongxue was unwilling to give up. He punched the fence. If the Demon Condor Legion did not leave, the Golden Condor Legion of the Central Plains would not be able to act so arrogantly. More than 1,000 Demon Vulture Legions. They could treat the Central Continent Air Force like chickens and dogs. Send a team of submarines to launch a sneak attack. Yang Dingtian ordered. Do not get within 10 li of the Central Continent Fleet. Do not ask for any results. The goal is to harass them. In short, do not give everyone the feeling that they are in a stalemate. Yes, Qiu Wanjie replied. Instantly, 8 teams, a total of 80 submarines, charged towards the left and right wings of the Central Continent Fleet. 4 hours later, the Western Fleet's submarines had already reached the left and right wings of the Central Continent Fleet. They were about 10 li away and began to aim. Yang Dingtian's order was to harass them, and not to destroy them in a large scale. Therefore, the submarines were spread out. Basically, each team was fighting for themselves. Basically, this was both harass and training the troops. The main purpose was to attack the enemy's strength, giving people the feeling that the Central Continent Fleet was being suppressed. When the submarines arrived at the edge of the Central Continent Fleet, they began to aim from 10 li away. After confirming that they were aiming properly, they began to fire torpedoes. 4 torpedoes were fired one after another. Immediately after, they began to aim for the second time. Then, they fired the second wave of torpedoes. Then, they no longer looked to see if they had hit the target. They dove down at full speed and quietly hit at the bottom of the sea, not moving at all. Boom! Suddenly, a huge fireball exploded on the surface of the sea. The entire ship was torn apart and completely shattered into pieces. Everyone knew that the Western Fleet's submarines had come again. Instantly, the entire Central Continent Fleet moved and was on full alert. Countless water ghosts jumped down to the bottom of the sea. Many speedboats equipped with crystal crossbows immediately rushed out and began to search for the submarines. Boom! Immediately after, there was another huge explosion. However, it was unknown how far away it was from the previous explosion point. Therefore, more speedboats rushed towards that place. Countless water ghosts also jumped down to the bottom of the sea in that direction. Just like this, the Western Fleet began to harass them endlessly. After a submarine fired 2 waves of torpedoes, regardless of whether it hit the target or not, it immediately sank to the bottom of the sea and did not move. After confirming that it was safe, it immediately moved to another place and fired another 2 waves of torpedoes. In short, they did not continue to fight and did not stop. Moreover, nearly 100 fleets were scattered very widely. On the left and right wings of the entire Central Continent Fleet, within a few hundred miles, there were submarines everywhere. Immediately, the Central Continent Fleet was completely exhausted. After one of them was sunk, all the crystal speedboats rushed towards that direction. After another one was sunk, they rushed towards this direction. Tens of thousands of water ghosts went down to the sea one after another. However, the sea was so big. After the submarine finished attacking, it immediately sank to the bottom of the sea. Those water ghosts wanted to find the submarine in the vast sea. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Immediately, the entire Central Continent Fleet went crazy. This kind of despicable sneak attack tactic was completely torturing people to death. After attacking, they would hide. After attacking, they would run. The results were not great. After fighting for a few hours, only 20 warships were sunk. However, the feeling of being suppressed and beaten was too sullen. The feeling of being beaten passively and not being able to fight back was too sullen. However, the submarine team was in a state of extreme excitement. This feeling was too wonderful. They did not participate in yesterday's submarine battle. They were taking a break and were feeling regretful. And today, when they were asked to sneak attack, they were feeling unhappy. Who knew? This kind of sneak attack was even more exciting. Although the results were not great, the feeling of being near the enemy, the feeling of danger accompanied by opportunity, was too good. The Central Continent Army was too pitiful. If they were on Earth, if your submarine team dared to do this, they would be courting death. The huge anti-submarine force would teach you how to be a human. However, in the primal chaos world, the anti-submarine force was completely zero. They still had to rely on the water ghosts to find the submarine. The anti-submarine force basically relied on their legs. What the hell was there to counter? At this moment, almost everyone in the Central Continent Fleet had the same thought. In the future, they definitely had to find a way to counter the submarine. Otherwise, they would not be able to fight this war. Everyone started to blame Zhu Qingzhu in their hearts. It wasn't as if he didn't know that the Western Army had the so-called submarines. He had already received the information, but what did he do? Before the war, he had criticized the submarines as worthless and didn't care at all. Now, these submarines were enough to make the 8 million Central Continent Army vomit blood. Young Dingtian also did not expect such a situation. In the era of Earth, during a large-scale battle, the space for submarines was very small. Most of the time, submarines were like lone wolves, sneak attackers in the dark. They would sneak under the sea and follow their target for thousands of miles. After dealing a fatal blow, they would immediately flee. And in the primal chaos world, wanting to use a few submarines to ambush an enemy warship in the vast sea? It was simply impossible. Firstly, the submarines in the primal chaos world were basically blind. They would travel thousands of miles on the surface of the water to reach the battlefield. Moreover, in a situation where there was no sonar, wanting to discover an enemy warship was just a dream. But in the primal chaos world, the scene was completely different from Earth. The submarine team was actually used in a large-scale battle. In a situation where their anti-submarine force was zero, the submarines were actually unrestrained. In such a situation, Yang Dingtian could only sigh. Empiricism was really killing people. Just like that, an entire day passed. The Western Continent Fleet's submarine team attacked everywhere, crazily launching sneak attacks. The results were not great. They sank less than 50 warships. Basically, out of 10 waves of attacks, it was already considered amazing if one wave hit. However, this was a fatal blow to the Central Continent Fleet's morale. The current Central Continent Fleet was still incomparably large. However, the arrogance and haughtiness from before had completely disappeared. All of them wished that they could clamp their heads between their necks. The soldiers on the transport ship gritted their teeth so hard that they almost broke their teeth. Damn the sea! There was no use in having so many people. They hated that they were not on land. Otherwise, if they directly charged over, with an army of 8 million, each person would spit out a mouthful of saliva and drown the Western Continent Fleet's army of 100,000. Previously, everyone in the Central Continent Fleet was laughing at the Western Continent Fleet. You fucking only have 100,000 people, and you still want to fight a decisive battle on the sea? What a joke, you are really courting death. You are really an ant stretching its legs to trip an elephant. In the end, 2 days had passed. The people of the Western Continent Fleet were all arrogant and arrogant. As for the Central Continent Army, they were all dejected. There was less than 200 miles of sea between the two armies. It was like a heavenly moat that could not be crossed no matter what. Sect Master Zhu is really stupid. Why did he think so much? If I directly charged over with 10,000 warships, those bastards in the Western Continent Fleet would be crushed to death. The people above are all pigs. Even if I was the commander, they wouldn't have lost so miserably. The soldiers grumbled in private. The words were crude, but the logic was not. It was true. If they did not care about anything, and just closed their eyes and let 10,000 warships charge over, they would not have lost so miserably. The ending would be much better. But the people above did not do that. They wanted to play around. In the end, they were pressed into the sea and beaten up. Out of the 3,000 warships, only 1,000 remained. No, it was not even 1,000. Today, they let people destroy another few dozen warships. Just like that, a day that made the Central Continent Army so sullen that they wanted to vomit blood passed. After firing the torpedoes, the 100 submarine squads went back in satisfaction. They thought that they would stop for the night. My Central Continent Army did not plan to ambush you, and did not plan to fight at night. After 4 to 6 hours, there was still no movement. The Central Continent Army thought that they could have a good night's sleep. Thus, the majority of them began to close their eyes and enter their dreams. After being tortured for 2 days and 2 nights, they could finally relax. Boom, 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 boom. Several loud sounds rang out. Then several fireballs exploded on the surface of the sea. Several warships were smashed to pieces. Fuck, 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 fuck. Almost 8 million soldiers of the Central Continent cursed at the same time. Another sneak attack. Are you fucking done yet? Young Dingtian, fuck your mother. In the following night, there were endless sneak attacks. No, this time, they were even more arrogant. There were even more submarines that came to ambush them. Therefore, after a while there was an explosion and a fireball. In the night, this kind of loud sound and fireball was even more dazzling. Young Dingtian, I'm fucking going all out. Finally, some Central Continent Army soldiers could not bear it anymore. Holding a sword, they directly jumped into the sea and swam over to fight with Young Dingtian. In the end, before they could swim 1,000 meters, all their fighting spirit was exhausted. Swimming in the sea was too fucking tiring. Then, they rested for a while before they had the strength to swim back. The strange thing was that Zhu Qingzhu did not react to this arrogant sneak attack. Because in the night, the Western submarines became more and more loyal. They were getting closer and closer to the Central Continent Army. Moreover, there was no distinction between troop carriers and warships. Once they saw the target, they would directly destroy it. However, many of the troop carriers were sailing ships. They did not have crystal energy arrays, so it was impossible to aim at them at night. Just like this, the Central Continent Army was in extreme pain. The sneak attacks of the submarines continued for an entire night. No one in the Central Continent Army could sleep. Moreover, at night, they did not even have the slightest chance to counterattack. Just like this, when each fireball exploded, there were still people. Then there were no more people. They were almost numb. Just like this, the 3rd day passed. Although the 2 fleets did not move, but they were pushed dozens of miles by the ocean current. Therefore, not only did the Central Continent Army not move forward, but they also retreated dozens of miles. After dawn, they looked at the sparse warships. Everyone discovered that there were so many warships that had been sunk last night. In the whole day, less than 50 warships had been sunk. In one night, more than 100 warships had been sunk. Now the Central Continent Fleet only had 700 to 800 warships. In terms of numbers, they were actually inferior to the opponent. When the sun rose, the leaders of the Central Continent forces could no longer bear it. They all came to Zhu Qingzhu's flagship and began to force him to abdicate. They could either send out 100,000 winged cavalry warriors or retreat. That's right, some people even proposed to retreat. Of course, this was only a reason to force Zhu Qingzhu. How could they retreat? If they retreated now, the Central Continent would be fucking dead. The 8 million troops were going to suppress the Western Continent. When they first arrived, it was a magnificent sight. Now they did not even see the Western Continent. They were barely halfway through the voyage. Retreat now. From now on, the Central Continent forces would not be able to see anyone. Therefore, the few hundred leaders of the Central Continent forces wanted to force Zhu Qingzhu to abdicate. They wanted to send out 100,000 airmen to destroy Yang Dingtian's Western Fleet. To Zhu Qingzhu, sending out 100,000 airmen meant failure. He had lost all his face. However, to the leaders of the Central Continent forces, it was a victory. In any case, the one who had lost face was Zhu Qingzhu, not them. At this moment, a black bird suddenly flew into Zhu Qingzhu's cabin. 15 minutes later, Zhu Qingzhu, who was wearing a black robe with golden patterns, slowly walked out of the cabin. His face was incomparably oppressive. He was not angry at all. His entire body was releasing an aura that made it hard for people to breathe. At this moment, everyone remembered that Zhu Qingzhu was not only the highest commander of the 8 million troops, but he was also the leader of the Black Heaven sect, an advanced martial grandmaster. When the Zhongzhou Navy commander saw this, he immediately knelt in front of Zhu Qingzhu and cried bitterly, "Sect leader, the defeat a few days ago was all my fault. My strategy and command were wrong, which led to the continuous defeat. It has nothing to do with your wisdom." Please punish me and give the 8 million troops an explanation. Although the Navy commander was not from the Black Heaven sect, he was the city lord of Libo City, one of the 27 factions. He was considered the person who knew the Navy the best in Zhongzhou. Libo City was surrounded by the sea and was located on an island. It was also considered a satellite faction of the Black Heaven sect. They were Zhu Qingzhu's trusted subordinates. No matter what, they would never forget to take the blame for their master. They would never forget to redeem their master's dignity. Koruahai, you're good, very good. Zhu Qingzhu gently stroked the Navy commander's head. Koruahai was so happy that he almost fainted. He thought to himself proudly, "Hee, what's there to be afraid of losing face? Getting benefits is more important. I'll take the blame for my master, and my master will give me land and money." Koruahai cried even harder and kowtowed desperately. "It's all my fault, all my fault. If it wasn't for my strategy, plan and command, how could we have lost today? Sect leader, please punish me, punish me." Koruahai cried bitterly. Zhu Qingzhu said lightly, "You're really good. Don't worry, I'll take care of your wife and treat your son as my own." "Thank you, sect leader, thank you." Koruahai instinctively kowtowed to express his gratitude. Then he was stunned. Sect leader's words, there seems to be something wrong. However, he did not think of that. Sect leader is so forgiving. How can I repay you? Koruahai continued to flatter. Then you can go without worry, Zhu Qingzhu said. Koruahai finally reacted. What does this mean? Why does the sect leader's words sound so scary? Zhu Qingzhu grabbed Koruahai's neck and brought him to the deck. He said to the millions of soldiers, "A few days ago, my Zhongzhou Navy suffered a great loss because of Koruahai's incompetence. Although I treat him like a trusted subordinate, for the sake of the bigger picture, I have to place righteousness before family. From today onwards, I will personally command the Zhongzhou Navy. I will definitely be able to save the world. I order that the Navy commander Koruahai is muddle-headed and incompetent. He is jealous of the virtuous and caused the Zhongzhou Navy to suffer a great loss. He is to be beheaded in public." Zhu Qingzhu shouted. Koruahai immediately understood. He raised his head and looked at Zhu Qingzhu in disbelief. "Zhu Qingzhu, fuck your mother," Koruahai shouted. Unfortunately, he could not make a sound. In front of millions of pairs of eyes, Zhu Qingzhu slashed down with his sword, and his head flew out. The Zhongzhou Navy's leader was inexplicably shocked. He felt a chill on his neck. As for the Zhongzhou army, their morale rose slightly. If Zhu Qingzhu personally commanded the Zhongzhou Navy, there might be a different result. After all, Zhu Qingzhu was famous in the world. Right at this moment, a large ship cut through the waves from the south, heading north at lightning speed. This ship was very big. It was estimated to be 4,000 to 5,000 tons. However, it was extremely fast. It could reach a speed of 10 kilometers per hour. There were no sails. It was still powered by crystals. Moreover, there were no flags on the ship. There was no one on the deck. Moreover, the shape of this ship was different from the other ships. It was incomparably beautiful and streamlined. It was more beautiful than the other ships on the sea. Moreover, the body of the ship was covered with a thick layer of iron armor. Zhu Qingzhu looked at the ship and sneered. "Young Dingtian, your end is here." The people around him were shocked. It was just a ship. Although it looked powerful, it could not change the situation. How could Yang Dingtian's end be here? Could it be that this ship was filled with celestial soldiers and generals? However, there was no one on the ship. As for the Western Fleet, they also saw the ship. At this moment, Qiu Wanjie reported, "Sect leader, the 200 sneak attack submarines are all ready. We can set off at any time. Please give the order." Yang Dingtian looked at the silhouette of the large ship. A strange feeling welled up in his heart. Although there were no flags on the ship, Yang Dingtian could faintly feel that this ship belonged to either the Vulture sect or the Cloud Sky Pavilion. Zhu Qingzhu had locked himself in his cabin for an entire day and night. He allowed himself to be beaten and did not retaliate. He was waiting for this ship. Zhu Qingzhu had placed all his hopes on this ship. Then what was inside this ship? "Sect leader," Qiu Wanjie said, "the sneak attack submarines are ready. Please give the order." Yang Dingtian waved his hand and said, "No need. Cancel the sneak attack plan. Why? Xiao Wanjie said. Our submarines are already very skilled. The sneak attack is not dangerous. As long as we attack for another day and night, the Central State Fleet will basically collapse. No need. The final battle is about to erupt. Yang Dingtian said indifferently. All warships get into position. The rescue ships at the back retreat at full speed. All soldiers get into position and prepare for the final battle. Yes, everyone shouted. Immediately, the entire Western Navy, everyone in the front of the battle position. All warships were cancelled. 100 gunships, 200 crystal ballista warships, and 500 submarines were all in position. They were ready for the final battle. That strange warship quickly merged into the center of the Central State Fleet. 2 hours later, Zhu Qingzhu gave the order. All warships move out. The final battle. Immediately, the remaining 700 Central Province warships, as well as that special warship, charged towards the Western Fleet at full speed. The final battle had begun. Nearly 13,000 words for the second update. Please support me. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.